People like you don't walk in here with $50,000. People like you steal $50,000. The words hung in the lobby of Meridian National Bank, Buckhead Branch, Atlanta. Marble floors reflected the chandelier light. Glass walls looked out onto Peachtree Road. The smell of leather drifted from the premium waiting chairs. And a middle-aged man in a gray suit was looking down at a black woman as though she were a stain on the Persian rug beneath his feet. Clint Vogler, branch manager, 22 years with Meridian. The kind of man who believed experience entitled him to say anything without fear of consequence. The woman standing before him did not react, did not flinch, did not flare with anger. She simply stood there, canvas bag on her shoulder, worn sneakers with frayed heels, natural hair unstyled, and a deposit slip in her hand. The deposit slip showed $50,000. Simone Adair, 42 years old. An appearance so plain that people like Vogler drew conclusions about her within 3 seconds. No jewelry, no makeup, nothing to indicate who she was, what she did, or how much money actually sat in her account. That was intentional. Everything was intentional. On the wall, just behind the teller counter, a gold-plated sign displayed elegant lettering. Customer Service Charter, Section 2.1. Meridian National Bank. All customers served with equal dignity and respect, regardless of background, appearance, or account balance. Simone read that sign, read it slowly, every word, then looked back at Vogler with eyes that held not a single ripple. "I'd like to speak with your supervisor." Vogler laughed, not a professional laugh, the laugh of a man who believed he had already won. "I am the supervisor, and I'm telling you to leave before I call security." Simone did not move, did not retreat, just stood there, as though she could stand all day, as though time belonged to her, not him. "Before I leave, I need your employee ID number, for my records." "Your records?" Vogler tilted his head, voice dripping with mockery. "What records would those be?" Simone did not answer. She simply pulled out her phone, opened an application, and began taking notes. Her fingers moved across the screen at a steady, precise pace, as though this were something she had done thousands of times before. Vogler looked at the phone, looked at the worn shoes, looked at the deposit slip, and concluded there was nothing to worry about. He did not know that over the past 6 months, 47 other people had stood in this exact position. 47 black customers with legitimate accounts, legitimate transactions, and the right to be served like any other customer. 47 people denied, insulted, driven out, and none of them ever came back. But Simone was not like them. Simone would come back, again and again, until she had everything she needed. She slipped the phone into her pocket, looked at Vogler one final time, and spoke in a tone so calm it bordered on unsettling. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Vogler. I'll be back." Then she turned and walked out of the bank. Worn shoes on marble floor, canvas bag on shoulder. Not a single sign that she had just been publicly humiliated. Not a single sign that this was exactly what she wanted. The glass door closed behind her. October Atlanta sunlight poured onto the sidewalk, and Simone Adair allowed herself to smile for the first time that day. 6 months of preparation. 47 complaints in the file. And now she had added herself to the list. Complaint number 48. Everything was going according to plan. 6 months earlier, OCC Southeast Regional Office, 14th floor, Richard B. Russell Federal Building, Atlanta. Agent Darnell Yates placed a thick folder in front of Simone. Red cover, stamped confidential. Upper right corner marked Meridian National Bank, Buckhead Branch, pattern investigation. 47 complaints in 18 months, all from customers of color, all at the same branch. Simone did not touch the folder immediately. She looked at it as though sizing up an opponent before a match. 18 years in banking regulation had taught her that folders like this always weighed more than they appeared, not because of the paper, because of what the paper represented. Pattern, she said slowly, not incidents. not complaints. Pattern. Yates nodded. Exactly right. Pattern. In banking regulation, that was the most dangerous word. It meant not a single rogue employee acting badly, not an isolated incident that could be blamed on misunderstanding, but a system, a culture, a policy designed, whether openly or implicitly, to treat certain groups of people differently. She opened the folder. Inside, 47 complaint forms arranged in chronological order. She did not read the content immediately. Instead, she looked at the dates in the upper right corner of each page. January 2023, February 2023, March 2023. Steady. 2 to 4 complaints every month. No gaps, no quiet periods followed by sudden spikes. That was not the signature of a few bad employees. That was the signature of an operation running smoothly, like machinery, like process. "Who signed off on these?" she asked, still not looking up. "Branch manager, Clint Vogler, 22 years with Meridian." "And he's still there." "Still there, still signing, still telling customers of color that their money isn't real." Simone flipped to the last page. The most recent complaint, September 2024. A 72-year-old woman named Evelyn Marsh. Meridian customer for 30 years. Denied notary service because they couldn't verify identity. 30 years of banking history, and they could not verify her identity. What happened to her complaint? Same as the others. Investigated internally. Finding, no policy violation. Case closed. They investigated themselves and found nothing wrong. 47 times. Simone closed the folder, set it on the table, looked at Yates with the eyes that everyone who had worked long enough in enforcement recognized. The eyes of someone who had decided. "What do you need from me?" Yates pushed over another sheet of paper. Assignment letter. OCC Examination Authority. 12 U.S.C. year 1920. We need someone they won't see coming. Someone who can document pattern from the inside. Someone who can walk in looking like every other customer they've dismissed and walk out with evidence they can't deny. Undercover bank examination. We don't call it that officially, but yes. Simone looked at the assignment letter, looked at the red folder, looked at 47 complaints from 47 people the system had failed. She did not need to think long. When do I start? First week. Reconnaissance. Simone opened a new account at Meridian National Midtown Branch. Not Buckhead. Not yet. She needed to understand the system before testing it. Initial deposit, $20,000. From her old savings account at a different bank. Real money. Real name. Real social security number. Nothing fabricated. She was simply a new customer with a new account. The bank did not ask many questions. Simple forms. Automatic verification. 15 minutes later, she had a checking account, savings account, and a debit card that would arrive in 7 to 10 business days. Smooth, professional. Exactly how a bank should operate. She made notes. Midtown branch, no issues. Service time, 15 minutes. Staff, professional, neutral. Second week. She transferred more money in. 100,000, then 200, then 500. Each time a transfer from her investment account. Each time no issues whatsoever. Her Meridian account now held $1,200,000. Savings from 18 years working in federal service. Money from a person who lived simply, never married, no children, no extravagant spending. Money from someone whose work was her life and whose life was her work. Third week. She began visiting Buckhead. First time she wore a navy blazer and black slacks. Hair straightened, neatly styled. Low-heeled pumps, professional, conventional. The kind of appearance the system recognized as acceptable. She entered at 10 a.m., requested to withdraw $5,000 in cash, served in 7 minutes. No one asked questions. No one looked at her longer than necessary. 7 minutes. No questions. No additional verification. She made notes, then waited. 4th week, 2nd visit. Jeans and a beige cardigan. Hair still straight, but more naturally styled. Sneakers instead of pumps. Casual, but still neat. She entered at 2 p.m. Requested to deposit $10,000 in cash. This time, 14 minutes. And one question. "Ma'am, can you verify the source of these funds?" The question came from Paige Ellsworth. Assistant manager. Blonde, late 30s, professional smile and scanning eyes. The kind of person trained to spot red flags. And the kind of person whose definition of red flag depended on who was standing in front of her. "Personal savings," Simone replied. Paige looked at her for another second, then nodded. "Thank you. Processing now." 14 minutes. One question. Source verification request. Simone made notes. The pattern was forming. Just beginning. If you're wondering what happens next, hit subscribe now so you don't miss part 2 of this story. 5th week. Preparation for the real test. Simone returned to her midtown apartment. 1 bedroom, 6th floor, view of Piedmont Park. Nothing special about the place except its anonymity. No neighbors who knew her name. No doorman asking questions. Nothing connecting her to anyone or anything. That was also intentional. She opened her closet, looked at both sides. Left side, professional attire. Blazers, slacks, blouses, the things she had worn to work for 18 years. Right side, casual wear. Jeans, cardigans, t-shirts, the things she wore when no one was judging. She pulled out a pair of sneakers from the corner. Old, worn heels, white faded to yellow. The shoes she used for jogging in the park before her knees started complaining and she switched to walking. Shoes no one would wear to a bank. The perfect shoes. She set them out. Next to them, an old canvas bag, the kind students used for textbooks, not a briefcase, not a designer handbag, a bag for someone with nothing to show off. And finally, she looked in the mirror. Hair. For 18 years, she had always straightened or tied it back. Professional standard, unspoken rule. The kind of rule no one wrote down, but everyone understood. She let her hair down, let it be natural. The curls and kinks she was born with, her mother's hair, her grandmother's hair, hair that American corporate culture had spent decades calling unprofessional. In the mirror, a different person looked back at her. Not Federal Bank Examiner Simone Adair, GS-14, 18 years of service, but a middle-aged black woman in old shoes and a canvas bag, the kind of person that people like Clint Vogler decided was not worth their time. That was her weapon, their prejudice. She just needed to let them use it. Morning of the test. October 15th, 10:31 a.m. Simone stood before the glass doors of Meridian National Bank, Buckhead branch. Inside, the marble lobby gleamed. Crystal chandelier, Italian leather chairs, artwork on the walls probably worth more than a teller's annual salary. Outside, Atlanta was entering autumn, leaves beginning to change on Peachtree Road, traffic crawling as usual, and a woman in worn shoes preparing to enter a place not designed for people like her. She took a breath, not to calm down, but to remember. Remember the 47 complaints in the red folder. Remember Evelyn Marsh, 72 years old, 30 years as a customer, told they could not verify her identity. Remember all the people who had stood in this position and been driven away as though they did not deserve to be there. Then she pushed the door and stepped inside. The lobby was cool, air conditioning perfectly calibrated, the smell of leather and money and something sterile, like a hospital but for rich people. Teller counter on the right. 3 stations, one serving a white man in a suit, 2 others empty. Simone walked to the nearest empty station, set her canvas bag on the floor, pulled out a pre-filled deposit slip. $50,000. Transfer from investment account to checking. Her account. Her money. The person behind the counter was a young white man, early 30s, badge reading Derek Hollis, senior teller. He was looking down at his computer screen when Simone arrived and took several seconds to look up. When he did look up, he scanned her from head to toe. Shoes, bag, hair, simple cotton shirt, no jewelry, no makeup. He had drawn his conclusion before she said a word. "Ma'am, you need to step aside. There's a line." Simone did not turn around to look. She did not need to. She had noted that no one was behind her when she walked in. "I don't see anyone waiting." Derek did not bother to check. "ATMs outside, faster for small transactions." Small transactions. He had not looked at the amount, had not asked what she wanted, had already decided that whatever she needed, the ATM was good enough for someone like her. Simone placed the deposit slip on the counter, pushed it gently toward him. "I'd like to make a deposit. $50,000. Derek's hand froze on the keyboard. His eyes moved to the paper, read the number, then looked back at her, as though the amount and the person standing before him could not possibly belong to the same reality. 50,000. From my investment account. Transfer to checking. Same name. Same social. Derek picked up the deposit slip, turned it over as if checking whether it was fake, then set it down with the expression of someone handed a puzzle with no solution. "I'm going to need to get my manager for this." "Is there a problem with my account?" "No, just policy. Large deposits require manager approval." Policy. The magic word. The coverall word. The word that allowed employees to do whatever they wanted as long as they could claim procedure required it. Simone knew that was not policy. She had written enforcement guidelines for Regulation CC. She knew exactly what banks could and could not require for deposits from established customers with verified accounts, but she did not say that. "I'll wait," she said instead. Derek disappeared into a glass-walled office in the back. Through the glass, Simone could see him talking to someone. A man. Gray suit, silver hair, the body language of authority. Clint Vogler. She had seen his photo in the complaint files, but photos did not capture the way he moved, the way he occupied space, the certainty in every gesture that said this was his territory and everyone in it existed at his pleasure. Vogler looked through the glass at her, looked at her shoes, her bag, her hair, drew his conclusions in less time than it took to blink. Then he smiled. Not a welcoming smile, the smile of a predator who had spotted easy prey. He walked out of the office, approached the counter, stood next to Derek with his arms crossed, looking down at Simone the way a landlord might look at a tenant 3 months behind on rent. "Ma'am, I'm Clint Vogler, branch manager. I understand you're trying to make a large deposit." "Yes, 50,000 from my investment account." "And where exactly did this money come from?" "My investment account, with Meridian. Same bank." "I mean originally. Where did you get the money to invest?" The question crossed a line. Banks could ask about source of funds for suspicious transactions. But this was not a suspicious transaction. This was an internal transfer between accounts held by the same person at the same institution. The money had already been verified when she deposited it initially. But Simone kept her voice level. "Savings. From my employment." "Employment doing what?" "Financial services." Vogler's eyes narrowed slightly. Financial services was vague enough to mean anything. Administrative assistant, call center worker, or something else entirely. He had clearly decided on the first two options. "Do you have documentation, pay stubs, tax returns?" "For a transfer between my own accounts?" "It's policy." There it was again. Policy. The shield behind which all discrimination could hide. "I'm not aware of any policy requiring tax returns for internal transfers," Simone said. "Can you show me where that's documented?" Something flickered in Vogler's eyes. Not quite anger. Not quite concern. Something closer to the recognition that this conversation was not going the way he expected. "Ma'am, I'm trying to help you, but if you can't provide documentation proving the legitimate source of these funds, I'm afraid we can't process this transaction. The legitimate source is my investment account at this bank, which has been open for 5 months and has a verified history. That's not sufficient. What would be sufficient? Employment verification, pay stubs from the last 3 months, tax returns from the last 2 years. Simone did not move, did not blink, just let the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. I've been a customer here for 5 months, she said finally. I've made multiple deposits, multiple withdrawals, all without issue. Today I'm wearing different clothes, and suddenly I need 2 years of tax returns? The words landed exactly where she intended them. Vogler's face tightened. Behind him, Derek shifted uncomfortably. Paige Ellsworth had appeared from somewhere, standing near the office door, watching. This has nothing to do with what you're wearing. Then what does it have to do with? Security protocols. They're triggered automatically based on transaction patterns. What pattern would that be? I can't disclose security parameters. I'm not asking about parameters. I'm asking what pattern in my transaction history triggered this review. I've made larger deposits before without any issues. Silence. Vogler had no answer that would not sound like exactly what it was. That was when he said it. The words that would become Exhibit A in a federal investigation. People like you don't walk in here with $50,000. People like you steal $50,000. The lobby went quiet. Even the ambient hum of the air conditioning seemed to pause. Derek's face went pale. Paige's hand flew to her mouth. And Vogler stood there, seemingly unaware that he had just crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Or perhaps aware and simply unconcerned. Because in 22 years, no one had ever made him face consequences for crossing it. Simone felt something shift inside her. Something cold and precise that had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with calculation. She had what she needed, but she wanted more. People like me, she repeated, her voice utterly calm. Can you clarify what you mean by that? You know what I mean. I'd like you to say it explicitly, for the record. There is no record. This is a private conversation. Every conversation on bank premises is recorded. Security cameras in the upper corners, audio pickup through the teller system. I'm sure you know that, Mr. Vogler. You've been here 22 years. Something flickered across Vogler's face, the first hint of uncertainty. He glanced up at the cameras he had apparently forgotten about, then back at Simone. I think we're done here. Derek, please escort this woman out. I haven't finished my transaction. Your transaction is denied. Leave now, or I'm calling security. Simone did not move immediately. She stood there for another 3 seconds, letting the cameras capture everything. Then she reached into her canvas bag and pulled out a small notebook. Before I leave, I need to document this for my complaint. Your name is Clint Vogler, branch manager. Employee ID? I'm not giving you my employee ID. It's on your badge. 4471. She wrote it down. And you? She looked at Derek. Derek Hollis. Badge number 3829. Derek's mouth opened and closed. He had not expected to be documented. Time of incident, 11:14 a.m. Location, Meridian National Bank, Buckhead Branch, 3500 Peachtree Road Northeast. Transaction attempted, $50,000 internal transfer. Transaction denied. Reason given, customer appearance inconsistent with transaction amount. Manager stated, quote, people like you don't walk in here with $50,000. People like you steal $50,000. End quote. She closed the notebook, looked at Vogler one final time. Thank you for your time, Mr. Vogler. I'll be filing a formal complaint. You should expect to hear from federal regulators. Then she turned and walked out. Behind her, silence. The kind of silence that falls when people realize something has gone very wrong but cannot yet articulate what. Outside, the October sun was warm on her face. She walked to her car, a nondescript Honda Accord parked 2 blocks away. Got in, closed the door. and only then did she let out a long, slow breath. Her hands were shaking, not from fear, not from anger, from the effort of maintaining perfect composure while being told to her face that she looked like a thief. She had known this would happen, had planned for it, had deliberately dressed to trigger exactly this response. But knowing and experiencing were different things. The intellectual understanding that racism existed did not prepare you for the visceral impact of having it directed at you. Simone closed her eyes, breathed, let the shaking subside. Then she opened her phone and sent a text to Darnell Yates. Phase 1 complete. They said exactly what we needed. Cameras caught everything. The response came 30 seconds later. Good. How are you? She stared at that question for a long moment. How was she? She was tired. She was angry. She was sad in a way that had nothing to do with herself and everything to do with the 47 people before her who had experienced the same thing without the armor of knowing it was part of a plan. But she was also determined. I'm fine, she typed back, ready for phase 2. That evening, Simone's apartment, laptop open on the kitchen table. She uploaded the day's notes to the OCC case management system through an encrypted connection. Timeline of events, names and badge numbers, direct quotes, camera locations and angles. Then she opened the master file and began cross-referencing. Derek Hollis, senior teller, appeared in 12 previous complaints. Pattern, dismissive behavior, redirection to ATM, requests for excessive documentation from customers of color. No complaints from white customers. Clint Vogler, branch manager, appeared in 23 previous complaints. Pattern, direct confrontation, accusations of fraud or theft, denial of service, threats to call police. 4 complaints mentioned the phrase, people like you. 3 mentioned being asked where they really got their money. Paige Ellsworth, assistant manager. 8 complaints. Pattern, subtle redirection, suggesting customers might be more comfortable at other branches, offering alternative services like prepaid cards instead of regular accounts. Marissa Kemp, customer service lead. 8 complaints. Pattern, creating technical difficulties with paperwork, losing documents, finding discrepancies that did not exist. 4 people, 1 branch, 47 complaints, and a pattern so clear it might as well have been written in neon. But pattern was not enough. Pattern could be explained away. Coincidence, misunderstanding, sensitivity. The complaints of people who were looking for offense where none was intended. Simone had heard all the excuses before, had seen how institutions protected themselves by delegitimizing the people who accused them. That was why she needed more. She needed them to do it to her, on camera, with words explicit enough that no one could claim misunderstanding. And today, Vogler had given her exactly that. People like you steal $50,000. That sentence, captured on audio, time-stamped and preserved in Meridian's own security system, was worth more than 100 complaint forms. But it was still just one incident, one data point. Defense lawyers would argue it was an isolated lapse of judgment, an unfortunate choice of words that did not reflect institutional policy. She needed to show that it was not isolated, that it was pattern, that when Vogler said those words, he was not deviating from the culture of the branch, but expressing it. That meant going back, again and again, until the evidence was undeniable. Ciao. 3 days later, October 18th, 10:15 a.m. Simone walked back into Meridian National Bank, Buckhead branch. Same canvas bag, same worn shoes, different shirt but equally plain, hair natural, same as before. But this time she carried documentation. Bank statement from her Meridian account printed that morning. Utility bill with her address. The paperwork Vogler had demanded. The lobby was quieter than last time, only 2 customers, both being served at the teller windows. Derek was at his usual station. When he saw her, his face went through several expressions in rapid succession: recognition, discomfort, and something that might have been fear. He remembered her. Good. Simone approached his window, set the deposit slip on the counter. Same amount, $50,000. I'd like to complete the transaction from Monday. Derek's eyes darted toward the glass office. Vogler was inside, on the phone, his back turned. Ma'am, I'm not sure that's a good idea. I have documentation this time, bank statement showing the source of funds, utility bill confirming my address, everything Mr. Vogler requested. That's good. But maybe you should use a different branch, for your own comfort. For her own comfort, as though the problem was her discomfort, not their discrimination. This is my branch, Simone said. It's closest to my home. I'd like to be served here. Derek picked up the phone on his desk, pressed a button, waited. Mr. Vogler, the customer from Monday is back. Yes, sir, she has documentation. He hung up. His face was pale. He'll be right out. Vogler emerged from the office 30 seconds later. His expression was controlled, but Simone could see the tension in his shoulders, the wariness in his eyes. He had remembered too, and he had realized, at some point in the last 3 days, that what he said to her might have been a mistake. Ms. I don't believe I caught your name. Adair. Simone Adair. Ms. Adair, I understand you've brought documentation? Yes, bank statement and utility bill, as requested. She placed them on the counter. Vogler picked them up, studied them with the kind of attention usually reserved for suspected forgeries. The bank statement showed her account balance, $1.2 million. She watched his face as he processed that number, watched the calculation happen behind his eyes, watched him recategorize her from suspicious to potentially valuable customer in real time. But by then, it was too late. The words from Monday could not be unsaid. The complaint could not be unfiled. The cameras had captured everything. This appears to be in order, he said carefully. Derek, please process Ms. Adair's deposit. Yes, sir. Derek took the deposit slip, typed rapidly. The transaction that should have taken 7 minutes on Monday was completed in 4. Is there anything else I can help you with today, Ms. Adair? Simone considered. She could leave now. She had what she came for. Proof that the same branch that denied her service on Monday would provide it on Friday once they knew she was wealthy. But there was something else she wanted. Yes, actually, I'd like a copy of the surveillance footage from Monday, for my records. Vogler's professional mask slipped, just for a second, but long enough for her to see the fear underneath. That's not something we typically provide to customers. I believe Georgia law gives me the right to request footage of myself in a place of public accommodation. If you'd prefer, I can file a formal request through the state. She was bluffing, slightly. The law was more complicated than that. But Vogler did not know how complicated, and he did not want to find out. I'll have to consult with our legal department, he said. Of course. Please have them contact me at their earliest convenience. She handed him a business card, not her OCC card, a personal card with just her name, phone number, and email. Nothing identifying her profession. Vogler took it, looked at her. Ms. Adair, I want to apologize if there was any misunderstanding on Monday. Our security protocols can sometimes seem intrusive, but they're designed to protect all our customers. Misunderstanding. The word that meant, I said something indefensible and I'm hoping you'll let me pretend I didn't. I appreciate that, Mr. Vogler. I'm sure the surveillance footage will clarify exactly what was said. She picked up her receipt, nodded politely, and walked out. Behind her, she could feel Vogler's eyes following her, could feel the calculations happening. Who was she? What did she want? How much trouble could she cause? He did not know the answer yet, but he was starting to suspect it was more than he could handle. If you're enjoying this story of justice against discrimination, hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And tomorrow's story will show you what happens when the system tries to protect its own. 1 week later. October 25th. Simone's apartment. Her phone rang at 7:12 p.m. Unknown number with a 404 area code. Atlanta. She answered. Ms. Adair, this is Nolan Carver, Regional Vice President for Meridian National Bank. Do you have a moment? Regional VP. Not branch manager. Not customer service representative. VP. Simone set down her dinner fork, walked to the living room, sat in the chair by the window where the city lights spread out below like scattered diamonds. I have a moment, Mr. Carver. I understand you've had some difficulties at our Buckhead branch. I want to personally apologize and assure you that Meridian takes customer service extremely seriously. I appreciate the call. I've reviewed the incident report, and I have to say, I'm troubled by what I've read. Mr. Vogler's conduct does not reflect the values of this institution. Incident report. So they had written it up, had documented their version of events before she could establish hers. What did the incident report say, Mr. Carver? A brief pause. I'm not at liberty to share internal documents, but I can tell you that we're taking this matter very seriously. Very seriously indeed. Seriously enough to do what? I'd like to invite you to our corporate office for a resolution meeting. I think if we can sit down together, we can find a way to make this right. Compensation for your inconvenience, perhaps a preferred customer status, whatever it takes to restore your faith in Meridian. Compensation, preferred status, the language of settlement, the language of making problems go away quietly. That's a generous offer, Mr. Carver. When were you thinking? Would next week work? Tuesday afternoon? Tuesday works. Where should I come? Perimeter Center. I'll have my assistant send you the details. I'll be there. Excellent. And Ms. Adair, I want you to know that we value customers like you. Customers who hold us accountable. That's how institutions improve. Customers like you. There it was again. The phrase that meant different things depending on who was saying it and why. Thank you, Mr. Carver. I'll see you Tuesday. She hung up, sat in the darkness of her apartment, looking out at the Atlanta skyline, thinking about what that phone call meant. A regional VP did not call ordinary customers to apologize for branch-level incidents. That was what customer service representatives were for. That was what form letters were for. A VP called when someone had flagged an account, when someone had looked at her name and her balance and her complaint, and decided this was a situation requiring escalation. The question was, what had triggered the flag? Was it just the size of her account? $1.2 million was significant, but not remarkable for the Buckhead branch. Plenty of wealthy customers. Was it the complaint itself? The explicit language Vogler had used? Or was it something else? Something she did not yet know. Simone opened her laptop, logged into the OCC system, checked the case file. Nothing new, no additional complaints filed in the last week, no flags from other agencies, no indication that Meridian had discovered who she really was. So, why the VP call? She made a note. Question to investigate. How did Carver learn about my complaint? What internal process triggered VP involvement? Then she closed the laptop and went back to her dinner. The food was cold. She ate it anyway. Tuesday, October 29th, 2:15 p.m. Meridian National Bank, Corporate Headquarters, Perimeter Center, Atlanta. Glass tower reflecting the afternoon sun. Simone arrived wearing the same clothes she had worn to the branch. Canvas bag, worn shoes, natural hair. If they expected her to dress up for the privilege of receiving their apology, they would be disappointed. The lobby was different from the branch, more corporate, less marble, more steel and glass. A reception desk staffed by a young woman in a blazer who smiled professionally as Simone approached. Welcome to Meridian National. How may I help you? I have a meeting with Nolan Carver, 2:30. The receptionist typed something, glanced at her screen. Something flickered across her face. Too quick to identify. Of course, Ms. Adair. Please have a seat. Someone will be down to escort you shortly. Simone sat in a leather chair that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Looked around, noticed the security cameras in the corners, noticed the badge readers on every door, noticed the way employees walked past without making eye contact, absorbed in their own concerns. A corporate hive. Everyone with a role, everyone with a function, everyone believing the hive served some greater purpose. At 2:28, a young man in a gray suit appeared. "Ms. Adair? I'm Tyler, Mr. Carver's assistant. Please follow me." She followed him to an elevator, up to the 8th floor, down a corridor lined with offices, to a corner conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view that stretched to Stone Mountain on a clear day. Inside the room, 4 people already seated around an oval table. Nolan Carver at the head. Late 40s, silver temples, the kind of face that appeared in annual reports next to optimistic earnings projections. Clint Vogler to his right, too, looking uncomfortable in a chair that seemed too small for him. Paige Ellsworth beside Vogler, expression carefully neutral. And a woman Simone did not recognize, seated at the far end with a legal pad and an expression of professional detachment. Dark hair, sharp suit, name badge reading M. Chen, compliance. Compliance. So they had brought their internal watchdog. Interesting. "Miss Adair, thank you for coming." Carver stood, extended his hand. His grip was firm, his smile practiced. "Please, have a seat." She sat across from Vogler, let her eyes meet his for just a moment. He looked away first. "I want to start by saying how seriously Meridian takes these matters," Carver began. "What happened at our Buckhead branch does not reflect our values or our standards. We've conducted an internal review, and we're prepared to take concrete steps to address your concerns." He slid a folder across the table. Simone opened it. Inside, a letter of apology on Meridian letterhead. A voucher for 12 months of waived fees. A certificate for preferred customer status with a gold-embossed logo. "We hope this demonstrates our commitment to making this right," Carver said. Simone read the apology letter, carefully worded, acknowledging communication challenges and service inconsistencies without admitting wrongdoing, the kind of language lawyers craft to sound apologetic while providing no ammunition for lawsuits. "I appreciate this, Mr. Carver, but before we discuss resolution, I have some questions about what exactly happened." "Of course. What would you like to know?" "I'd like to see the surveillance footage from October 15th, the day of the initial incident." Carver glanced at the compliance officer. Ms. Chen made a small note on her pad. "That's not something we typically share with customers," Carver said. "Privacy considerations, other customers may be visible." "I'm only interested in footage of my interaction with Mr. Vogler. Surely that can be isolated." "It's technically complicated." "I'm happy to wait while your IT department works on it." Silence. Vogler shifted in his chair. Paige studied her fingernails. "We can look into that," Carver said finally. "Miss Chen, can you coordinate with IT?" "Of course." Ms. Chen left the room. Simone watched her go, noting the slight tension in her shoulders. Something was not right. The compliance officer should have been prepared for this request, should have had an answer ready, unless the answer was one they did not want to give. "While we wait," Simone said, "I'd like to understand what policy Mr. Vogler was following when he demanded 2 years of tax returns for an internal transfer." Vogler opened his mouth. Carver cut him off with a raised hand. "Our security protocols are triggered automatically based on transaction patterns and risk assessments. Mr. Vogler was following procedure." "What risk assessment would flag a customer transferring money between their own accounts?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss our security parameters in detail." "Then can you tell me how many customers were asked for tax returns in the month of October? And of those, how many were customers of color?" Another silence, longer this time. "I don't have those statistics readily available," Carver said. "I do." Simone pulled a folder from her canvas bag, set it on the table, opened it to reveal a stack of printed documents. 47 formal complaints filed against the Buckhead branch in the past 18 months, all from customers of color, all involving service denials, excessive documentation requests, or accusations of fraud. She watched their faces. Vogler went pale. Page's carefully neutral expression cracked. Carver's eyes narrowed. "Where did you get those numbers?" he asked. "Public records. The OCC publishes complaint aggregates by institution and branch." That was true, sort of. The OCC did publish aggregates. But Simone's specific numbers came from the internal case file, which was decidedly not public. Still, Carver could not prove that, and the numbers themselves were accurate. 47 complaints is a significant pattern, Mr. Carver. It suggests that what happened to me was not an isolated incident, but rather standard operating procedure at this branch. I assure you, we take every complaint seriously. Do you? Because every one of those 47 complaints was investigated internally and closed with a finding of no policy violation. 47 times, customers reported discrimination. 47 times, Meridian investigated itself and found nothing wrong. The words hung in the air, heavy, undeniable. Ms. Chen returned. Her face was carefully blank, but Simone noticed she did not sit down immediately, stood by the door as though preparing for a quick exit. "The footage," Ms. Chen said. "There's a technical issue." "What kind of issue?" "A gap. From 11:14 to 11:32 on October 15th. The system shows a recording interruption." Simone felt something cold settle in her chest. 18 minutes. The exact window of her confrontation with Vogler. "A recording interruption," she repeated. "On the exact day of my complaint. During the exact minutes of my interaction with Mr. Vogler." "These things happen," Carver said quickly. "Technical glitches, server issues. It's unfortunate timing, but... Mr. Carver, I've worked in financial services for 18 years. I know how bank security systems work. They don't just glitch for 18 minutes during customer confrontations. That footage was deleted." "That's a serious accusation." "It's a serious situation." She looked at Vogler, at his pale face, at the sweat beginning to form on his forehead. "Mr. Vogler, did you delete that footage?" No. I don't have access to the security system." "Who does?" Silence. "Mr. Carver, I'd like a forensic analysis of your security server. I'd like to know exactly when that footage gap was created, and by whom." "Ms. Adair, I think you're overreacting to what is clearly..." "I'd also like to know why a regional VP is personally handling a routine customer complaint, why my account was flagged for escalation, and why your compliance officer just discovered that critical evidence has been destroyed." She stood up, gathered her documents, put them back in her canvas bag. "I came here expecting a genuine resolution. Instead, I've discovered what appears to be a cover-up. You can expect to hear from federal regulators, Mr. Carver, soon." She walked to the door, paused, turned back. "Oh, and Mr. Carver, you should know that I recorded this entire meeting. Georgia is a one-party consent state. Everything that was said here is now documented." She held up her phone. The recording app was clearly visible on the screen. Then she walked out. Behind her, chaos. Voices raised, someone calling for legal, someone else asking what the exposure was. In the elevator, going down, Simone allowed herself one small smile. They had tried to cover their tracks, deleted footage, prepared scripted apologies, brought lawyers. But they had not expected her to push back, had not expected her to know what questions to ask, had not expected her to document everything. And they certainly had not expected her to have 47 complaints worth of pattern evidence in her canvas bag. The game was changing, and they did not even know the rules yet. That night, secure call with Darnell Yates. Footage deleted, 18-minute gap, exactly the window we needed. Yates's voice was calm, but Simone could hear the tension underneath. Obstruction. That escalates things. Significantly. Who do you think deleted it? Vogler claims he doesn't have access, but someone does. and someone made a decision to destroy evidence within days of my complaint. That suggests coordination, not just one bad actor. Exactly right. Silence on the line. The sound of Yates thinking. Simone, there's something you should know. We've been tracking Meridian's internal communications, legal privilege issues, so we can't use most of it directly, but we've seen patterns. What kind of patterns? Email traffic spiked after your first visit, not just at the branch level. Corporate, regional VP office, general counsel. A lot of people very interested in one customer complaint. Because of my account balance? Partly, but there's something else. A name keeps appearing in the traffic. Not Vogler, not Carver, someone higher. Who? We don't know yet. The emails reference protocol and previous guidance, without specifying who provided the guidance. Someone set the rules for how that branch operates. Someone with enough authority to establish patterns across 18 months. Simone thought about Vogler's certainty when he confronted her, the practiced ease of his accusations, as though he had said those words many times before, as though he knew he was protected. You're saying this goes higher than branch management. I'm saying someone at Meridian created a system that allowed 47 discrimination complaints to be dismissed without consequences. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens by design. So Vogler is just the face of something larger. Possibly, which is why we need to be careful. If we move too fast, we catch the small fish and the big fish swims away. What do you want me to do? Keep going. They're rattled. Scared people make mistakes. Let them make a few more before we show our hand. Simone nodded, even though Yates could not see her. The resolution meeting was scheduled as damage control. They offered compensation, 12 months of waived fees. Standard playbook, buy silence with small money. I turned it down. Good. What did they do? Carver looked like I'd slapped him. He expected me to take the deal and go away quietly. He's about to learn that's not how this works. They talked for another 20 minutes. Strategy, timeline, evidence gaps that still needed filling. When she hung up, Simone sat in the darkness of her apartment and thought about what Yates had said. Someone higher. She had assumed this was about Vogler and his branch, about one manager with 22 years of unchecked prejudice creating a hostile environment. But if there was someone above him, someone who had designed the system and protected it, then this was bigger than one branch, bigger than 47 complaints. And she needed to find out how much bigger. The next week passed in a blur of documentation. Simone filed her formal complaint through Meridian's customer service hotline. Detailed, specific, citing dates, times, quotes, and the deleted footage gap. She filed a parallel complaint with the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Different agency, different jurisdiction, but another data point in the federal system. She continued visiting other Meridian branches. Not Buckhead. Different locations around Atlanta, documenting her treatment at each one, building a comparison data set. Perimeter branch. No issues. 7 minutes. Professional service. Midtown branch. No issues. 9 minutes. One question about deposit source, answered satisfactorily. College Park branch. 14 minutes. 2 questions. Request for additional ID. Served eventually, but with visible reluctance. East Point branch. Service denied. Told to use the ATM. The pattern was clear. Branches in wealthier, whiter neighborhoods treated her fine. Branches in majority black neighborhoods treated her with suspicion, which was the opposite of what racist logic would predict. You would expect discrimination to be worse in white areas where her presence would stand out more, but it was worse in black areas where she should have blended in, which suggested something else entirely. These branches were not discriminating based on customer race. They were discriminating based on customer appearance, and the branches in poorer areas had lower thresholds for what appearance triggered suspicion. A well-dressed black woman in Buckhead might be questioned but ultimately served. A casually dressed black woman in East Point would be turned away without a second thought. The system was not just racist, it was classist, filtering out people based on their perceived economic status, which correlated strongly with race but was not identical to it. That made it harder to prove, and more insidious. November 5th, Simone's apartment. Evening. Her phone rang. Unknown number, 770 area code, Atlanta suburbs. Ms. Adair? This is Marcus Thompson. I'm a reporter with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Do you have a few minutes? A reporter. Simone felt a small spike of adrenaline. How did you get this number, Mr. Thompson? Public complaint records. You filed with the CFPB. Your contact information was attached. She had known that was a risk. Complaints to federal agencies became part of the public record, albeit with a delay. She had filed anyway, accepting the exposure as part of the process. What can I help you with? I'm working on a story about discrimination in banking. Meridian National has come up in several complaints. I was hoping you might be willing to share your experience. Share her experience. Go public. Put her face and name on a story that would appear in the state's largest newspaper. That was not part of the plan. Or was it? Pressure from multiple directions could accelerate things. Corporate damage control was one thing. Managing a federal investigation was another. But a media firestorm on top of both. That might shake loose the higher-level fish that Yates was hunting. I'd be willing to talk, Simone said carefully. But I have conditions. Name them. I want to review the story before publication, not to censor anything, but to ensure accuracy. Standard practice. What else? I want to be one source among many. I don't want this to become the story of one angry customer. I want it to be the story of a pattern. That's actually what I'm building toward. You're not the first person to contact me about Meridian. You're the 12th. 12. 11 others had reached out to the same reporter about the same bank. When did the others contact you? Over the past few weeks. After your CFPB complaint was published. It seems to have opened floodgates. Simone thought about the 47 complaints in the red folder. Thought about how many of those people had given up, moved on, assumed nothing would change. Now they were reaching out, finding each other, finding someone willing to tell their story. That was something she had not planned, but it was something she could use. Mr. Thompson, I'll talk to you, but I want to meet the others too. If we're going to tell this story, we should tell it together. I can arrange that. When are you free? This weekend. Oh. Saturday, November 9th. A community center in southwest Atlanta. Afternoon. Simone arrived early. The room was modest. Folding chairs arranged in a circle. Fluorescent lights humming overhead. The smell of coffee from a pot someone had brought. 11 people were already there when she walked in. Some young, some old, some well-dressed, some in work uniforms, all black, all with stories. Marcus Thompson sat to one side, notebook open, digital recorder on the table. Simone took a seat, looked around the circle, waited. A woman in her 70s spoke first. Silver hair, floral dress, hands folded in her lap. I'm Evelyn Marsh. I've been a Meridian customer for 30 years. Last month, they told me they couldn't verify my identity to notarize a document. 30 years, and they looked at me like I was a stranger trying to steal my own signature. Simone recognized the name. Complaint 47, the one that had been in Yates's folder 6 months ago. One by one, others spoke. A teacher who was denied a loan despite perfect credit. A small business owner whose accounts were frozen without explanation. A retiree who was accused of check fraud when depositing his own pension. A young professional who was asked if she was sure she was in the right bank when she walked into the Buckhead branch. The stories were different in detail but identical in pattern. The same suspicion, the same accusations, the same dismissal when they complained. 47 complaints in a folder. But sitting here, listening to real voices tell real stories, the numbers became human. These were not statistics. These were people. People who had been humiliated in public. People who had been told in 100 different ways that their money was not as real as white people's money. If these stories are resonating with you, share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Sometimes justice starts with one person refusing to be silent. When it was Simone's turn, she spoke carefully. I went to the Buckhead branch on October 15th. I was trying to deposit $50,000 from my own investment account. The branch manager looked at my clothes, looked at my hair, and told me, these are his exact words, "People like you don't walk in here with $50,000. People like you steal $50,000. Murmurs around the circle, nods of recognition. They had heard variations of those words themselves. I filed a complaint. The bank tried to make it go away with an apology and some waived fees. When I asked to see the surveillance footage, 18 minutes was missing. Deleted. They deleted it? The young professional's voice was sharp with outrage. Someone did. They claim it's a technical glitch. But the gap is exactly the window of my confrontation with the manager. So they're covering up. It appears that way. Marcus Thompson leaned forward. Ms. Adair, you said you work in financial services. Can you tell us more about that? The question she had been expecting, the moment of decision. If she revealed her real identity now, everything changed. The story would shift from customers fighting back to federal sting operation. The dynamic would be different. The other complainants might feel used rather than empowered. But if she did not reveal it, she was keeping secrets from people who had trusted her with their stories. She chose a middle path. I have experience with banking regulations. I know what questions to ask and what documentation to request. That's why I've been pushing harder than most customers would. Not a lie, not the whole truth, but enough. Is that why the VP called you personally? Evelyn asked. In 30 years, I never got a call from anyone above branch level. I think they're worried because I know enough to be dangerous. They can't just dismiss me the way they dismissed most complaints. So what do we do? The teacher asked. We've all filed complaints. Nothing happened. Individual complaints are easy to dismiss. Patterns are harder. If we present our stories together, 12 people, same bank, same treatment, that's a pattern they can't ignore. Present to who? Federal regulators. The media. She glanced at Thompson. And anyone else who will listen. The room shifted, energy changing. People who had felt isolated in their grievances, now seeing themselves as part of something larger. There's one more thing, Simone said. Someone at Meridian created this system, set the policies that allowed this to happen for 18 months. The branch manager is the face of it, but there's someone higher, someone who designed it. Finding that person is how we change things. How do we find them? By making enough noise that they have to show themselves. People in power stay hidden as long as things stay quiet. When things get loud, they make mistakes. Evelyn nodded slowly. Then let's get loud. The next 2 weeks moved fast. Thompson published his story on November 19th. Front page of the AJC. 12 customers accuse Meridian Bank of racial discrimination. Photos of the complainants, excerpts from their testimonies, data on complaint patterns. The story went viral. Local news picked it up, then national, CNN, MSNBC. The New York Times ran a follow-up piece about discrimination in banking industry-wide. Meridian stock dropped 4% in 2 days. Corporate issued a statement. We take these allegations seriously and are conducting a thorough internal investigation. The same statement they had issued after every previous complaint. The same words that meant nothing. But this time, there was pressure. Shareholders demanding answers. Board members asking questions. Politicians sensing an opportunity to appear tough on corporate malfeasance. And behind it all, quietly, the OCC investigation continued. Simone maintained her cover, participated in community meetings, did interviews as a concerned customer, never revealing her federal role. Let the movement grow organically while she gathered evidence through official channels. The folder was getting thicker. Emails obtained through examination authority. Internal memos about enhanced verification protocols. Training materials that, read between the lines, instructed employees on how to profile customers without using explicitly discriminatory language, and one name, appearing more and more frequently in the documentation: Harrison Webb, CEO. The man at the top. His signature was on the policy documents. His approval on the budget that funded the security protocols. His name carbon-copied on emails that set the tone for how branches were expected to operate. If Vogler was the face, Webb was the architect. But connecting him directly to discrimination required more than policy signatures. It required evidence that he knew what was happening and approved it. Evidence that the system was designed to discriminate, not just accidentally resulting in discrimination. That evidence was harder to find. CEOs were careful. Their communications filtered through lawyers, their decisions laundered through committees, their fingerprints wiped from anything incriminating. Still, the pressure was working. People inside Meridian were starting to talk. Anonymous tips flowing to Thompson, documents appearing in the OCC's digital mailbox with no return address. Someone inside wanted this exposed. The question was who and why. November 27th, the day before Thanksgiving. Simone received an email on her personal account. Sender, anonymous, routed through multiple servers. Ms. Adair, I know who you really are. I know why you're here. We should talk, not in the bank, not on record. Tomorrow, 2 p.m., Oakland Cemetery, near the Bell Tower Monument. Come alone. She read it 3 times. Her heart rate elevated, but her mind stayed cold, analytical. Someone knew. Someone had figured out she was not just a customer. The question was who and what they wanted. A trap? Possible. Corporate security trying to identify the threat and neutralize it. A whistleblower? Also possible. Someone inside who wanted to help but needed protection. A third option. Someone playing their own game, using her as a piece. She forwarded the email to Yates with a note. Your thoughts? His response came in 10 minutes. Risky, but valuable if legitimate. I'll have surveillance nearby. Your call. Her call. The burden of undercover work. The decisions that no one else could make for you. She thought about the 47 complaints, the 12 voices in the community center, the pattern stretching back 18 months. Whatever was waiting at Oakland Cemetery, she needed to know. I'll go, she replied. Thanksgiving Day, November 28th, 1:45 p.m. Oakland Cemetery was quiet. Most people were at home, preparing turkey and arguing with relatives. The paths between graves were nearly empty. Just a few joggers, a handful of tourists photographing Victorian monuments. Simone walked slowly toward the bell tower, a Gothic revival structure rising among the headstones. Her sneakers were silent on the paved path. Her canvas bag held nothing but her phone, a bottle of water, and a small voice recorder. The afternoon was cool, cloudy, a hint of rain in the air. At 2 p.m. exactly, she reached the bell tower, leaned against the stone wall. Waited. 5 minutes passed. 10. She began to think this was a false lead. Then a voice behind her. Don't turn around. Female voice, middle-aged, slight tremor that could be nervousness or fear. Simone did not turn. Who are you? Someone who can help, if you're willing to listen. I'm listening. Webb knows about the investigation. Not officially. OCC hasn't served notice yet. But he has sources. People inside the regulatory agencies who tip him off. Simone felt cold. If Webb had advance warning, he could destroy evidence, coordinate stories, prepare defenses that would make prosecution nearly impossible. How do you know this? Because I'm the one who told him. Silence. The weight of that confession settling between them. I didn't know what he would do with the information. I thought he would clean things up, fix the problems before regulators found them. Instead, he started deleting footage, shredding documents, moving money to cover tracks. Why are you telling me this now? Because I saw the news stories, the customers, the faces. The voice cracked slightly. I thought it was isolated incidents, overzealous employees. I didn't know it was designed. Didn't know there were 47 people who filed complaints and got nothing. But now you know. Now I know. Simone processed. Whoever this was, they had access to Webb, had been trusted enough to share intelligence about federal investigations. That meant senior level, possibly executive. What do you want? I want to fix what I helped break. I have documents, emails, the original policy memos, everything Webb signed, everything he knew. Why not go to the OCC directly? Because I don't know who else he has, who else is feeding him information. If I go through official channels, he'll know within hours. By the time anyone acts, the evidence will be gone. So you're coming to me. You're not official, not yet, and you're motivated. Those people at the community center, you care about them. That matters. Simone thought about the ethics. Accepting evidence from an anonymous source outside official channels. It could taint the investigation, create legal vulnerabilities that defense lawyers would exploit. But if Webb was destroying evidence and had moles inside the regulatory system, official channels might already be compromised. What do you have? A flash drive, under the bench to your left. Don't pick it up until I'm gone. How do I know this isn't a setup, something to discredit me? You don't, but ask yourself, why would Webb want to discredit a customer? You're not public as a federal examiner. As far as the world knows, you're just Simone Adair, angry customer. No one at Meridian has any reason to target you unless they know more than they should. True. Uncomfortably true. There's something else, the voice said. On the drive. A memo from 2019, the year Webb became CEO. It outlines what he calls customer stratification protocols, instructions for identifying which customers warrant full service and which should be discouraged from using premium branches. Discouraged how? Extra verification, account holds, suggestions to use ATMs or lower-tier branches, anything that makes them feel unwelcome without explicitly refusing service. The architecture of discrimination, built into policy from the CEO's first year. Why would Webb put that in writing? Because in 2019, he thought he was untouchable. Because no one at Meridian questioned him. Because he didn't imagine anyone would ever see these documents who wasn't already on his side. Simone heard footsteps moving away on gravel, resisted the urge to turn. Wait, why are you doing this? What do you get out of it? The footsteps paused. I helped build something that hurt people. I told myself I didn't know. But I did know. I just didn't want to see. A longer pause. Maybe this is penance. Maybe it's cowardice. Anonymity is easier than facing consequences. Maybe I just want to sleep at night again. The footsteps resumed, fading into distance. Simone waited 5 minutes, then casually sat on the bench to her left, reached underneath, and felt a small object taped to the underside. Flash drive. Black plastic. No markings. She slipped it into her canvas bag without looking at it. Stood. Walked away. The clouds were darkening. First drops of rain beginning to fall. Behind her, the bell tower stood silent among the graves, keeping its secrets. That night, Simone's apartment. She did not plug the flash drive into her personal laptop. That would be foolish. Instead, she used a burner device, purchased for cash months ago, never connected to any network tied to her identity. The drive contained 3 folders. The first, emails. Dozens of them. Harrison Webb's sent box, apparently exported by someone with administrative access. Messages to branch managers, to regional VPs, to HR and legal. One email stood out, dated January 3, 2019. Subject, strategic priority, customer experience enhancement. Team, as we enter 2019, I want to outline our approach to customer stratification. Not all customers are created equal. Those with premium potential, high balances, growth trajectory, professional profiles, deserve our best attention. Those who are unlikely to generate significant revenue should be directed to self-service options. Branch managers will receive updated guidelines for identifying customer tiers based on appearance, behavior, and transaction patterns. The goal is efficient resource allocation, not discrimination. We serve everyone. We simply serve some more attentively than others. HW appearance, behavior, transaction patterns, code words, corporate speak for profiling, dress poorly, self-service, natural hair, ATM, casual clothes in a premium branch, sorry, we need enhanced verification. The second folder, policy documents, the customer stratification guidelines Webb had referenced. Page after page of detailed instructions on how to identify low-value customers and encourage them to use alternative channels. Nothing explicitly mentioned race, but the criteria, attire, speech patterns, comfort level with technology, likelihood of generating escalated service requests, correlated almost perfectly with racial and class markers. Legal enough to defend in court, discriminatory enough to create the patterns Simone had documented. The third folder, a single file, memo from March 2023. Subject, Buckhead Branch. Complaint management. Clint, I understand you've received some noise about customer interactions. Don't let it distract you. The policies are sound. The complaints will be handled through normal channels, which means they won't be handled at all. Keep doing what you're doing. You have my full support. HW, full support. From the CEO. For the branch manager, who had told Simone she looked like a thief. This was not a rogue employee. This was not a branch-level problem. This was institutional design, from the top down. And now Simone had proof. She called Yates at 11 p.m., apologized for the late hour, explained what she had. This changes everything, he said when she finished. If these documents are authentic, they'll need to be verified. Chain of custody is complicated given the source. We can work around that. Subpoena Meridian servers. If the same documents exist in their system, authenticity is established. Webb might have destroyed them already. My source said he's been shredding. Then we move fast. Serve examination notice first thing Monday. Demand full document preservation. Make it clear that destruction of evidence is federal obstruction. What about the mole? My source said Webb has someone inside OCC. Silence. The uncomfortable kind. I'll handle that internally, Yates said finally. For now, you focus on the external case. Can you be in Washington Monday for a briefing? Yes. Good. And Simone, what you've built here, the customer coalition, the media pressure, the evidence chain, it's exactly what we needed. Better than we hoped. You should be proud. She did not feel proud. She felt tired and angry and sad in a way that had nothing to do with professional accomplishment. 47 people, Darnell. 47 complaints before anyone paid attention. I know. How many branches? How many years? How many people walked away humiliated before anyone started counting? I don't know, but we're counting now. That matters. Did it? She was not sure anymore. Counting the damage did not undo it. Documenting discrimination did not heal the people it had wounded. But it was what she could do, so she would keep doing it. Monday then, she said. Monday. She hung up, sat in the darkness, thought about Harrison Webb, asleep in some mansion somewhere, confident that his power would protect him, and thought about Evelyn Marsh, 72 years old, denied notary service after 30 years as a customer, still waiting for someone to tell her that what happened to her was wrong. The flash drive sat on her table. Black plastic, no markings, the weight of evidence that could bring down a CEO or expose the limits of institutional accountability. She did not know yet which it would be, but she knew one thing: whatever happened next, it would not be quiet. Monday was coming, and Meridian National Bank was about to learn what happened when the people they dismissed decided to push back. The rain continued through the night. Simone did not sleep. She reviewed the documents again, made copies on multiple devices, encrypted backups stored in separate locations. If anything happened to her, if the investigation was compromised, if Webb's mole reached further than Yates suspected, the evidence would survive. At 3 a.m., she made herself coffee, stood at the window, watched the city lights blur through the rain. Her mother's voice from years ago, "Baby, you can't save everyone, but you can make sure nobody gets away with pretending they didn't see." Mama had been a nurse, 40 years in public hospitals, had seen enough suffering to know that systems failed more often than they succeeded. But she had also seen, occasionally, what happened when someone refused to look away, when someone documented, when someone remembered. The truth has weight, Mama used to say. Eventually, it breaks through. Simone hoped she was right. Outside, Atlanta slept. Banks closed, vaults locked, security systems watching empty lobbies. But somewhere in those buildings, in servers and archives and corner offices, the truth was waiting. 47 complaints, 12 voices, 1 investigation, and a flash drive with enough evidence to change everything, or nothing at all. Monday would tell, Sunday morning. The rain had stopped, sun breaking through clouds. Simone went to church, not for religion, she had stopped believing long ago, but for community. The church her grandmother had attended, still standing after 60 years, still full of people who remembered when Simone was a child with skinned knees and too many questions. The pastor spoke about Thanksgiving, about gratitude in difficult times, about finding light in darkness. Simone sat in the back row, let the words wash over her without absorbing them, watched the congregation, teachers, nurses, mechanics, retirees, people who worked hard and got by, and probably had bank accounts that nobody looked twice at because they had learned long ago not to expect anything better. These were the people the system had failed, not the 12 who spoke up, the hundreds, thousands who never did, who absorbed the small humiliations and moved on, who chose peace over confrontation, survival over justice. She understood that choice, respected it. Sometimes it was all you could do, but sometimes, if you were lucky, if you had the right position and the right evidence and the right moment, you could do more. After the service, Evelyn Marsh found her. "I saw you on the news," Evelyn said, "standing with us at the community center. You didn't have to do that." "Neither did you." "I'm 72 years old. What are they going to do to me?" Evelyn smiled, but her eyes were serious. "But you've got years ahead. Career, reputation. You're risking something." Simone thought about the flash drive in her apartment, the anonymous source, the mole inside OCC, the 1,000 ways this could go wrong. "Some risks are worth taking. I know, I just wanted you to know that we see it, what you're doing. Even if nothing comes of it, even if they wiggle out somehow, we see it." She squeezed Simone's hand. Warm, papery skin, the grip of someone who had held many hands through many troubles. "Thank you, Ms. Marsh. Thank you, baby, for not looking away." Monday, December 2nd. Washington, D.C., OCC headquarters. A nondescript building that housed the regulators responsible for overseeing national banks. Flags out front, security in the lobby, the quiet hum of bureaucracy. Simone arrived at 8 a.m. Yates met her in a conference room on the 7th floor. Also present, 2 attorneys from the Enforcement Division, a senior examiner Simone had worked with on previous cases, and someone she did not recognize, a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and a deputy director badge. "Ms. Adair, thank you for coming." The deputy director extended her hand. "I'm Patricia Vance. I'll be overseeing this case from here on out." Overseeing, taking it out of Yates's hands. That could be good. More resources, higher priority, or bad, more politics, more caution. "I've reviewed your documentation," Vance continued. "Impressive work. The customer coalition, the media strategy, the evidence compilation. Exactly the kind of approach we need for cases like this." Thank you. The flash drive materials are more complicated. Anonymous source, chain of custody issues. Defense will challenge admissibility. I understand. But if we can verify the documents through official examination, if we find matching files on Meridian servers, that establishes authenticity independent of the source. When do we examine? Vance checked her notes. Notice served at 6 a.m. this morning. Examination team arrives at Meridian headquarters at noon. Full document preservation order in effect. 6 hours from now. Whatever evidence still existed would be locked down by the end of the day. What about the mole? Simone asked. Vance's expression tightened. That's being handled separately. Internal affairs matter. I can tell you that the individual has been identified and removed from any access to this case. Removed, not arrested, not named. The quiet discipline of bureaucracy protecting its own. Simone let it go. That battle was not hers to fight. What do you need from me? Your testimony. When we have enough to move forward, notice of charges, potential consent order, you'll be our primary witness on the customer experience side. Your documentation of the pattern, the incidents, the retaliation. Retaliation. She had not thought about it in those terms. But the deleted footage was retaliation. The escalation to VP was retaliation. The anonymous email could have been retaliation, or could have been genuine whistleblowing. Hard to know which. I'm ready. Good. There's one more thing. Vance hesitated. The CEO, Harrison Webb. His attorneys have already reached out. He wants to negotiate. Negotiate what? Resolution. Settlement. The usual package, penalty paid, reforms implemented, no admission of wrongdoing, everyone moves on. The same offer they had made to Simone at the Buckhead branch, just bigger numbers, higher stakes. What are you going to tell him? Vance smiled, cold and precise. I'm going to tell him that some things can't be negotiated, that when you build a system to discriminate against people and then cover it up when you get caught, the consequences are not optional. She stood, extended her hand again. Thank you for your work, Ms. Adair. Now, let us do ours. The examination took 3 days. Simone was not part of it directly. Her role was documentation and testimony, not forensic analysis. But she received updates through Yates. Day 1. Document preservation confirmed. Servers locked. IT staff interviewed. Day 2. Email archives searched. Matching documents found for everything on the flash drive. Chain of custody established. Authenticity verified. Day 3. Harrison Webb placed on administrative leave by Meridian's board. Clint Vogler terminated. Nolan Carver resigned. The news broke on Thursday, December 5th. Every major outlet running the story. CEO of major bank implicated in systematic discrimination. 47 complaints ignored. Evidence allegedly destroyed. Federal investigation underway. Simone watched the coverage from her Atlanta apartment. Saw the protesters outside Meridian headquarters. Saw Evelyn Marsh being interviewed on CNN, telling her story to millions of viewers. Saw the hashtags trending, #banking, while black, justice for, Meridian, #we count. Her phone buzzed constantly, messages from the community coalition, from reporters wanting comments, from people she had not heard from in years, congratulating her on something they did not fully understand. She did not respond to most of them, just sat in her apartment, watching the system she had documented begin to crack under pressure. It was not over. Webb's attorneys were already mounting defenses. The settlement negotiations would drag on for months, possibly years. Some people would face consequences. Others would slip away quietly. The reforms would be announced with fanfare and implemented with reluctance. That was how these things worked. Not fairy tale justice, with villains punished and victims vindicated, but slow, grinding, partial accountability. Better than nothing, less than everything. Still, it was something. In her red folder, 47 complaints. 47 people who had been told their grievances did not matter. 47 voices that the system had tried to silence. Now those voices were being heard. Friday evening, December 6th. Simone's phone rang. Unknown number. She almost did not answer. Ms. Adair, this is Harrison Webb. She went cold. How did you get this number? Does it matter? I wanted to talk to you, directly, before the lawyers take over everything. I'm not sure that's appropriate. Probably not. But I've learned this week that appropriate is a luxury I no longer have. Silence. She waited. I read your complaint, the original one, before everything blew up. The words Vogler used, people like you steal $50,000. I didn't know he talked to customers that way. Didn't you? A pause. Maybe I didn't want to know. Maybe I told myself that policies were neutral and people were responsible for how they implemented them. Maybe I convinced myself that customer stratification was business strategy, not discrimination. And now? Now I've spent 3 days watching my life disintegrate. My position, my reputation, my legacy, everything I built for 30 years coming apart because I couldn't see what was right in front of me. Simone listened, trying to identify what she was hearing. Contrition, self-pity, manipulation, all three probably, in varying proportions. What do you want, Mr. Webb? I want to understand. Who are you, really? You're not just a customer. Customers don't build 47 complaint coalitions. Customers don't get regional VPs on the phone. Customers don't show up with flash drives full of internal documents. I'm someone you underestimated. Yes, I got that. But there's more. Who sent you? No one sent me. I'm here because I chose to be. The OCC chose you. She did not confirm, did not deny. Let the silence speak. I thought so. Webb's voice was tired, resigned. I should have seen it coming. Pattern investigation. Examiner placed inside as a customer. Classic approach. I've seen banks get hit with it before. I just never thought it would happen to us. Because you thought you were untouchable. Because I thought I was careful. The policies were legal. The language was neutral. Everything filtered through compliance. We checked every box. You checked the boxes, but you built a system that hurt people. 47 people who filed complaints. How many more who didn't bother? How many walked out of your branches feeling like they didn't belong? Like their money wasn't real? Like they were less than human? Silence. I don't have an answer for that. No, you don't. She heard him breathing. Heavy, ragged. The sound of a man whose certainties had collapsed. I'm going to ask you something, he said finally. And I want an honest answer. Not for the record. Not for the investigation. Just between us. I can't promise anything. I know, but I'm asking anyway. A pause. Was I the target? From the beginning? Or was it Vogler, and I just got caught in the net? Simone thought about Yates's briefing 6 months ago. 47 complaints. Pattern investigation. Someone at Meridian created this system. The investigation was about pattern, Mr. Webb, not individuals. You became a target when the evidence pointed to you. But you didn't know it would. At the beginning. No, I walked into your Buckhead branch expecting to document branch-level discrimination. I found institutional design. So I did it to myself. You built the system. The system did the rest. Another silence, longer this time. For what it's worth, Webb said, I'm sorry. Not for getting caught. For what we did, what I authorized, what I pretended not to see. Tell that to Evelyn Marsh. Tell it to the 12 people in the community center. Tell it to everyone who walked out of your branches feeling like they were worth less than your marble floors. Would it make a difference? I don't know, but it would be honest, and that might be a start. The line went quiet. She thought he had hung up. Then, thank you, Ms. Adair, for not looking away. The same words Evelyn had used. Strange, hearing them from the man who had created what no one was supposed to see. Goodbye, Mr. Webb. She hung up, sat in the darkness of her apartment. Outside, Atlanta glittered. Millions of people living their lives unaware of the small battles fought in conference rooms and bank lobbies and anonymous meetings at cemeteries. Tomorrow, the investigation would continue. The negotiations would begin. The slow machinery of accountability would grind forward, producing outcomes that would satisfy no one completely. But tonight, for the first time in 6 months, Simone felt something shift. Not victory, not closure. Something quieter. Something like the first breath after holding your lungs too long. The truth had weight, and it was starting to break through. But as she sat there, her laptop pinged with a new email. Anonymous sender. Encrypted route. Miss Adair. The flash drive was only part of it. There's more. Much more. Webb wasn't working alone. The stratification protocols came from somewhere higher. National level. Multiple banks. Coordinated policy. This isn't just Meridian. This is industry-wide. More coming. Stay ready. She stared at the message, felt the ground shift beneath her. One bank. One CEO. One pattern. That was what she had thought she was investigating. But if this message was true, she had only scratched the surface. The story she thought was ending was actually just beginning. And whatever came next would be bigger, darker, and more dangerous than anything she had faced before. The cursor blinked. She reached for the phone to call Yates, then stopped. If there were moles inside OCC, if the corruption reached industry-wide, who could she trust? She set the phone down, looked at the message again. Stay ready. Outside, the city lights flickered, rain beginning to fall again. And somewhere in the darkness, someone with more secrets was watching, waiting, planning. The real investigation was about to begin. The rain fell harder now, streaking the windows of Simone's apartment like tears on glass. She read the anonymous email again, each word sinking deeper into her consciousness. Webb wasn't working alone. The stratification protocols came from somewhere higher, national level, multiple banks, coordinated policy. This isn't just Meridian. This is industry-wide. She had spent 6 months building a case against one bank, one CEO, one pattern of discrimination affecting 47 documented customers and countless undocumented others. Now someone was telling her that Meridian was just a symptom, that the disease ran deeper, wider, through the entire circulatory system of American banking. If true, it changed everything. If false, it was a distraction designed to derail her focus at the critical moment. She needed to verify. But how? The anonymous source from the cemetery had provided documents that proved authentic. This new message could be from the same person, following up with the next layer of truth. Or it could be from someone else entirely, an opportunist, a saboteur, a player she had not yet identified. Simone opened a new browser window, searched for news about discrimination complaints at other major banks, found the usual scattered reports, individual incidents, isolated settlements, occasional consent decrees. Nothing suggesting coordination, nothing indicating industry-wide policy, but absence of evidence was not evidence of absence. Coordinated discrimination would be designed to look uncoordinated. Each bank's policies would be superficially different while achieving the same results. The pattern would only become visible if someone looked at all of them together. Had anyone done that? She searched deeper, found academic studies on racial disparities in banking services, found advocacy group reports on discriminatory lending, found government data showing that Black and Hispanic customers were denied services at higher rates than white customers across virtually every major institution. The data existed. The pattern existed. What she could not find was evidence of coordination, of banks deliberately aligning their discriminatory practices. That would require internal documents, communications between executives at different institutions, policy memos referencing industry standards or best practices that somehow always resulted in the same outcomes. The kind of evidence that would only exist in places she could not access, unless the anonymous source was offering to provide it. She composed a careful reply. What do you have? How can you prove coordination? Sent it into the encrypted void. Waited. No response came that night. Monday, December 9th. Washington, D.C. OCC headquarters. Simone sat in the same conference room where she had briefed Deputy Director Vance 4 days earlier, the same attorneys, the same senior examiner. But the mood was different now. The examination of Meridian had yielded more than expected. Not just the documents matching the flash drive contents, but additional materials that painted an even darker picture. Internal compliance reports that flagged discriminatory patterns as early as 2020. Reports that were reviewed, acknowledged, and filed without action. Training materials that instructed employees to identify high-risk customers using criteria that mapped almost perfectly onto racial and socioeconomic markers. Email chains discussing how to handle complaints in ways that satisfied regulatory requirements without actually addressing the underlying issues. And most damning, a memo from Harrison Webb to his senior leadership team, dated February 2022, explicitly stating that customer stratification has been successful in directing low-value traffic away from premium branches, improving service metrics and profitability. Low-value traffic. Human beings reduced to traffic patterns. Obstacles to profitability rather than customers to serve. We have enough for a notice of charges, Vance said. Probably enough for criminal referral on the obstruction. The deleted footage, the document destruction, that's clear intent to impede investigation. What about Webb personally? His attorneys are negotiating. They're offering full cooperation in exchange for reduced personal liability. Cooperation meaning what? Testimony about how the policies were developed and implemented, names of everyone involved in the decision-making, complete documentation of the stratification program from inception to present. Simone thought about the anonymous email. Industry-wide, multiple banks, coordinated policy. What if it goes beyond Meridian? Vance looked at her sharply. What do you mean? I received a message, anonymous, like the first source, claiming that the stratification protocols didn't originate at Meridian, that they came from somewhere higher, national level, multiple institutions. Silence in the room. The attorneys exchanged glances. Do you have evidence of that? Not yet. Just the claim. Vance leaned back in her chair. That would be a significant expansion of scope. Different banks mean different regulators. OCC handles national banks, but state-chartered institutions fall under state regulators and the FDIC. Credit unions are NCUA. If this is truly industry-wide, we're looking at a coordinated multi-agency investigation. Is that possible? Possible, yes. Practical? She shook her head slowly. It would take years, massive resources, political will that may or may not exist depending on who's in charge. So we focus on Meridian. We focus on what we can prove, what we can prosecute, what we can resolve within the scope of our authority. Vance paused. But if your source provides evidence of broader coordination, we don't ignore it. We document it and refer it to appropriate parties. Appropriate parties. The phrase that meant the information would disappear into interagency bureaucracy, emerging years later as a footnote in some Inspector General report that no one would read. Simone understood. She did not like it, but she understood. What's next for Meridian? Consent order negotiations. We present our findings, they present their response, we negotiate terms, penalties, reforms, monitoring, the usual process. Timeline? Months, probably. Their attorneys are good. They'll fight for every concession. Months. While the anonymous source waited with evidence that could expose something larger. While whatever coordination existed continued undisturbed at other institutions. But Simone had learned long ago that justice moved at its own pace. Pushing too hard, too fast, usually meant losing everything. Better to secure the victories you could win than to overreach and end up with nothing. I'll keep working the Meridian case, she said. And I'll follow up with the source if they provide more. Do that, but be careful. Anonymous sources have their own agendas. Not all of them align with ours. That afternoon, Simone's phone rang. Atlanta area code. Unknown number. Ms. Adair, this is Evelyn Marsh. The 72-year-old woman from the community center. The customer denied notary service after 30 years with Meridian. Mrs. Marsh, how are you? Tired but hopeful. I saw the news about Mr. Webb. Administrative leave. Investigation ongoing. It feels like something is finally happening. Something is, slowly, but something. That's why I'm calling. The community group has been talking. We want to do more than just wait for the government to act. We want to file a civil suit. Civil suit. Private litigation. Separate from the regulatory action. Different court, different standards, different potential outcomes. That's within your rights. Have you consulted an attorney? We're meeting with one tomorrow. Civil rights specialist. She says we might have a class action case. Not just the 12 of us, but anyone who was discriminated against at Meridian branches over the past several years. Class action. Potentially thousands of plaintiffs. Massive discovery. Years of litigation. But also the possibility of substantial damages. Money that would go directly to the people harmed, not just government coffers. That sounds promising. She mentioned something else. Said that if there's federal investigation ongoing, the evidence we uncover in civil discovery might help the government case, and vice versa. Parallel tracks, civil and regulatory actions reinforcing each other. It was a strategy that had worked in other major discrimination cases. Mrs. Marsh, be careful about what you share with whom. The regulatory investigation has confidentiality requirements. I can't give you information that isn't public. I understand. I'm not asking you to. I just wanted you to know what we're planning, and to thank you again for starting this. I didn't start anything. You did. All of you who filed complaints. All of you who refused to stay silent. Maybe. But you gave us hope that someone was listening. That matters more than you know. After she hung up, Simone sat with the phone in her hand, thinking about the parallel tracks unfolding. Regulatory action, criminal referral, civil litigation, media pressure, community organizing, multiple fronts, multiple pressures, all converging on the same target. That was how systemic change happened, not through any single action, but through the accumulated weight of many actions, each reinforcing the others until the structure could no longer hold. But it also meant complexity, moving parts that could interfere with each other, strategies that might conflict, information that might leak in ways that undermined cases rather than building them. She would need to be careful. Very careful. 3 weeks passed. December became January. The holidays came and went without much celebration for Simone. She worked through Christmas, reviewing documents, preparing testimony, coordinating with the enforcement team. The consent order negotiations progressed slowly, as Vance had predicted. Meridian's attorneys fought over every provision, every penalty amount, every monitoring requirement, every word in every clause. Meanwhile, the anonymous source had gone silent. No response to Simone's email, no new revelations, just silence that could mean anything. That the source had been discovered, that they had lost their nerve, that they were waiting for the right moment, that the whole thing had been disinformation from the start. Simone focused on what she could control: the Meridian case, the evidence, the testimony. On January 15th, she received a subpoena to testify before a federal grand jury. The criminal referral on obstruction was moving forward. Someone, possibly Webb, possibly Vogler, possibly others, would face charges for destroying evidence. On January 22nd, the civil class action was formally filed. Marsh v. Meridian National Bank, seeking damages for discriminatory practices affecting an estimated 3,000 customers over a 5-year period. On January 29th, Harrison Webb resigned as CEO. His attorney released a statement citing personal reasons and desire to allow the company to move forward without distraction. No admission of wrongdoing, no acknowledgement of harm, just departure, with a severance package that probably exceeded what most of his victims would earn in their lifetimes. If you're following this story, hit that subscribe button now. The next few chapters will show exactly how institutions try to escape accountability and what it takes to hold them responsible anyway. The resignation was presented as accountability. Webb was gone. The problem was solved. Time to move on. But Simone knew better. Webb's departure changed nothing about the system he had built. The policies remained in place until formally rescinded. The culture remained unchanged until actively reformed. The people who had implemented the discrimination remained employed, waiting to see which way the wind blew before deciding whether to continue or conform. Real accountability required more than a CEO's resignation. It required consequences that reached into the structure itself. That was what the consent order was supposed to provide. February 12th, OCC headquarters, formal consent order hearing. The room was larger than the conference rooms Simone had become familiar with. More formal. A raised platform for the hearing officers, tables for the opposing parties, seats for witnesses and observers. Simone sat in the witness section, next to Darnell Yates and the enforcement attorneys. Across the aisle, Meridian's legal team, 6 attorneys in expensive suits, tablets and folders arranged before them with military precision. At the respondents' table, the interim CEO, a board member, and the new chief compliance officer. No Webb, no Vogler. The faces of the old regime had been scrubbed away, replaced by people whose job was to project reform and cooperation. Deputy Director Vance presided, flanked by 2 other senior OCC officials. Court reporter at the side, capturing every word. This hearing is convened to consider the proposed consent order in the matter of Meridian National Bank, Vance began. The Office of the Comptroller of the Currency alleges violations of the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, the Fair Housing Act, and associated regulations. Meridian has agreed to neither admit nor deny these allegations while consenting to specific remedial measures. Neither admit nor deny. The legal formula that allowed institutions to accept consequences without accepting responsibility. A compromise that satisfied regulatory requirements while protecting against civil liability. Simone had seen it many times, still hated it every time. The hearing proceeded through procedural matters, verification of authority, confirmation of representation, acceptance of proposed terms subject to review. Then came the substantive portion. The proposed order includes a civil money penalty of $2.8 million, Vance read, implementation of mandatory fair lending training for all employees, independent audit of all branches for compliance, appointment of a federal monitor for 36 months, quarterly reporting to OCC on complaint patterns and resolution. She looked up at Meridian's representatives. Does the respondent wish to make a statement? The interim CEO stood. Margaret Chen, no relation to the compliance officer from the earlier meeting. A career banker brought in specifically to manage the crisis. Professional, polished, carefully scripted. Meridian National Bank is committed to serving all customers with equal dignity and respect. We recognize that past practices fell short of this commitment. We accept the proposed consent order as an opportunity to demonstrate our dedication to meaningful reform. Carefully worded, acknowledging failure in abstract terms while avoiding specifics, the kind of statement lawyers craft to sound apologetic without providing ammunition for litigation. The office has also proposed specific personnel actions, Vance continued. Termination of former branch manager Clint Vogler, suspension without pay for senior teller Derek Hollis, 6 months, followed by reassignment, written reprimands for assistant manager Paige Ellsworth and customer service lead Marissa Kemp, demotion of former regional vice president Nolan Carver to branch manager position in a different region. Personnel consequences, some significant, others token. Vogler gone, but not criminally charged, despite everything he had said and done. Derek suspended, but not fired. Paige and Marissa continuing their careers with nothing more than letters in their files. And Carver, the VP who had tried to negotiate Simone's silence, merely shuffled sideways. Same salary, same benefits, different title, partial justice. The best the system could deliver. Does the respondent accept these terms? Margaret Chen nodded. We accept. The office calls its first witness, Simone Adair. Simone rose, walked to the witness chair, took the oath, sat facing the room full of people who had built, enabled, or tolerated the system she had documented. Ms. Adair, please state your role in this matter. I am a federal bank examiner with the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency. I was assigned to investigate patterns of discriminatory treatment at Meridian National Bank's Buckhead branch. Can you describe the methodology of your investigation? I conducted undercover examination by posing as a regular customer. Over a period of several weeks, I documented my treatment at multiple Meridian branches while varying my appearance and presentation. The purpose was to test whether service quality correlated with perceived socioeconomic status. What did you find? When presenting as a professional, business attire, conventional hairstyle, I received prompt service with no additional verification requests. When presenting as lower income, casual clothes, natural hair, worn shoes, I experienced extended service times, excessive documentation demands, and in one instance, direct verbal abuse from the branch manager. Can you describe the verbal abuse? Simone kept her voice level. Branch manager Clint Vogler stated, quote, "People like you don't walk in here with $50,000. People like you steal $50,000. End quote. Murmurs in the room. Even among people who had read the reports, hearing the words spoken aloud carried weight. What happened after this incident? I filed a formal complaint and requested surveillance footage. The bank informed me that 18 minutes of footage from the relevant time period had been lost due to a technical glitch. Subsequent forensic analysis determined that the footage had been deliberately deleted. Deleted by whom? The deletion was authorized from branch manager Vogler's terminal. However, we were unable to determine whether Vogler personally performed the deletion or whether someone else used his credentials. Unable to determine. One of many gaps in the evidence chain. One of many places where deniability had been carefully constructed. The examination continued for another hour. Documentation of the 47 complaints, analysis of the pattern, presentation of the internal policy memos, reading of Webb's emails into the record, then cross-examination from Meridian's attorneys. Ms. Adair, you testified that you varied your appearance to test the bank's response. Isn't it possible that the different treatment you received was due to factors other than perceived socioeconomic status? Such as time of day, different employees on duty, volume of customers, any number of variables that might affect service quality. I controlled for those variables as much as possible. Same branch, similar times, similar transaction types. The primary variable was my appearance. But you can't be certain that appearance was the decisive factor. The pattern across 47 complaints suggests it was not coincidental. The explicit statement by Mr. Vogler confirms that appearance-based judgment was occurring. Mr. Vogler's statement was regrettable, but it was one person's words, not institutional policy. Simone paused. This was the argument she had expected. The bad apple defense. Blame individuals, protect the system. The internal memos introduced as Exhibit B outline what Meridian called customer stratification protocols. These protocols instructed employees to identify low-value customers based on appearance, behavior, and transaction patterns, and to direct them towards self-service options. Mr. Vogler's statement was not a deviation from policy. It was an expression of policy. Those protocols say nothing about race. They don't need to. When you instruct employees to judge customers based on clothing, speech patterns, and comfort level with technology, you create criteria that correlate strongly with race and class. The effect is discriminatory regardless of whether the intent is explicitly stated. But you cannot prove intent. Intent is not required for a finding of disparate impact discrimination under EQOA. Effect is sufficient. The attorney paused, consulted his notes, tried a different angle. Ms. Adair, you are a federal employee who was assigned to investigate Meridian. Isn't it true that finding violations was, in essence, your job? That you had institutional incentive to interpret ambiguous situations as discriminatory? My job is to examine banks for compliance with federal law. I report what I find, whether violations exist or not. In this case, violations existed. And you stand by that finding even though others might interpret the same evidence differently? I stand by my findings because they are supported by documentary evidence, statistical analysis, and direct observation. Others are welcome to interpret the evidence as they choose. That is what hearings are for. The cross-examination continued for another 30 minutes but gained no ground. Simone had prepared for every angle, anticipated every challenge. The evidence was solid. The pattern was clear. The violations were documented beyond reasonable dispute. When she stepped down from the witness chair, she felt the familiar exhaustion that followed high-stakes testimony. The mental drain of maintaining precision under pressure. The emotional weight of speaking truth to people who did not want to hear it. But also something else. A quiet satisfaction that the truth was now officially on record. Whatever happened next, these facts existed. They could not be unsaid, unexplained, unremembered. The system had been named. The harm had been documented. The people responsible had been identified. That mattered. Even if the consequences were partial, even if the reforms were incomplete, even if the fight was not over. It mattered. The hearing concluded the next day. The consent order was accepted, with minor modifications that made no substantive difference. Meridian agreed to pay, agreed to reform, agreed to monitoring. In exchange, the bank continued operating. The leadership remained largely intact. The shareholders took a modest hit, but nothing catastrophic. The institution survived, as institutions almost always do. The community celebrated anyway. Evelyn Marsh was quoted in the AJC, "It's not everything we wanted, but it's more than we ever expected to get. Sometimes that has to be enough." Sometimes that has to be enough. The wisdom of people who have fought systems long enough to understand that total victory is rare. That partial progress, accumulated over time, is how change actually happens. Simone returned to Atlanta, returned to her apartment, returned to the quiet that followed completed operations, and waited for the next message from the anonymous source. It came on February 20th, 8 days after the consent order hearing. Same encrypted route, same anonymous sender. Ms. Adair, congratulations on Meridian. A small victory, but necessary. Now for the larger picture. Attached, Industry Coordination Evidence Package. Proceed with caution. The people behind this are not bankers protecting profits. They are something else entirely. More when it is safe. The attachment was large, encrypted within encryption. She spent an hour extracting and verifying before she could read the contents. What she found made her forget to breathe. Emails between senior executives at 4 major banks. Meridian was one. The others were household names, institutions with combined assets exceeding $2 trillion. The emails discussed what they called market segmentation best practices, strategies for optimizing customer portfolios, techniques for redirecting low-margin traffic to appropriate service channels. The same euphemisms Meridian had used, the same approach, the same outcomes. But these were not independent development. The emails showed coordination, references to industry working groups, mentions of consulting firms that had provided segmentation frameworks to multiple banks, discussion of how to implement similar policies while maintaining sufficient differentiation to avoid pattern detection. They had designed it together, implemented it together, hidden it together. And one email thread was particularly damning. Dated March 2019. Subject line, National Consumer Banking Strategy Council, Q1 Implementation Review. Colleagues, I'm pleased to report that segmentation protocols are now active at all member institutions. Early metrics show significant improvement in cost per service ratios and premium branch profitability. Customer complaints remain within acceptable parameters, with internal resolution rates exceeding 95%. The key is consistency of approach without consistency of documentation. Each institution must maintain the appearance of independent policy development. Coordination must remain invisible to regulators and public. Next steps: expand protocols to additional markets. Refine criteria to maximize effectiveness while minimizing legal exposure. Ensure that all participating executives understand the confidentiality requirements. Regards, SV. SV. Initials only. No full name. No institutional affiliation in the email itself. But the distribution list included executives at all 4 banks, including one name that made Simone's blood run cold: Harrison Webb. Webb had not created the stratification system. He had implemented it, following a template developed by someone else, someone with the reach to coordinate policies across multiple competing institutions, someone who was still out there, still operating, still protected by the very invisibility the system was designed to maintain. Simone did not sleep that night. She read and reread the documents, traced the connections, built a map of the coordination that had been hidden for years. 4 banks, billions in assets, millions of customers, thousands of people subjected to discrimination that had been planned, tested, refined, and deployed like a product launch. Not just racism, not just corporate greed, something more systematic, more deliberate, more organized, and completely invisible to everyone who had been investigating individual institutions. She thought about the consent order just finalized with Meridian, the penalties, the reforms, the monitoring. All of it addressed symptoms, while the disease continued spreading through other hosts. She thought about calling Yates, sharing the evidence, escalating to whatever interagency process could handle something this large. But the anonymous source's words echoed, "The people behind this are not bankers protecting profits. They are something else entirely. Something else." What did that mean? And if Webb had been part of this coordination, if he had been implementing someone else's template, why had he agreed to cooperate with regulators? Why resign quietly instead of fighting? Unless he was protecting something, or someone. Unless his cooperation was another layer of the cover-up, sacrifice the visible figure to protect the invisible ones. Simone needed to know more, needed to understand what she was actually dealing with before deciding how to proceed. She composed a reply to the anonymous source. "Who is SV? What do you mean by something else entirely? I need to understand the full picture before I can act." The response came faster this time, within hours. SV is not a person, it is a position, strategic vision, title used by whoever chairs the Coordination Council. The council has existed for 11 years. Rotating leadership, membership by invitation, no public acknowledgement of existence. The people involved are not motivated solely by profit. Some believe they are improving the banking system by optimizing customer distribution. Others have darker purposes. I cannot tell you more without exposing myself. What I have given you is enough to begin. Be careful. They are already aware that Meridian was compromised. They will be watching for signs of expanded investigation. Already aware. Watching. Simone felt the familiar prickle of danger that came with undercover work, the sense of being observed by forces she could not see, but also determination. The same determination that had carried her through 6 months at Meridian. They had built a system to discriminate against people like her, people like Evelyn Marsh, people like the 47 complainants and the thousands more who never complained. They had hidden it behind corporate language and institutional complexity and the comfortable assumption that no one would ever connect the dots. They were wrong. If you're invested in seeing this story through, share it with someone who believes in accountability. These stories matter because they show that ordinary people can challenge extraordinary power. The next 3 months were a careful dance. Simone could not officially expand her investigation without authorization from OCC leadership. But requesting authorization required explaining how she had obtained the evidence. Anonymous source, encrypted communications, chain of custody that would make lawyers cringe. So she worked around the edges, reviewed public filings from the other banks mentioned in the emails, searched for patterns in their complaint data, built a circumstantial case that something larger was happening without revealing the specific evidence that proved it. She also maintained contact with the anonymous source who provided additional materials in small doses. Fragments of meeting minutes, partial membership lists with names redacted, references to consulting firms that had developed the segmentation frameworks. One name appeared repeatedly: Whitfield Partners, a boutique consulting firm specializing in customer experience optimization for financial services clients. Simone researched them, found a sleek website with vague service descriptions, a client list that included major banks, insurance companies, and investment firms, leadership team with impressive credentials and carefully bland biographies. Nothing overtly suspicious, just another consulting firm selling expensive advice to corporations. But when she cross-referenced Whitfield's client list with the banks in the coordination emails, the overlap was complete. Every bank involved had been a Whitfield client. Every bank had implemented segmentation protocols within 2 years of engaging Whitfield's services. The consulting firm was the connection point, the mechanism through which coordination could occur without direct communication between competitors. And Whitfield was not regulated by OCC, not regulated by any banking authority. They were a private firm selling advice, and advice, however harmful its implementation, was not illegal. The architecture was elegant. Discriminatory policies developed by consultants, implemented independently by each bank, coordinated through industry groups that existed only in encrypted emails and private meetings. No single institution was responsible. No single person could be held accountable. The system had been designed to diffuse responsibility until it disappeared, but that design had a weakness: the consultants. If Whitfield had knowingly developed discriminatory frameworks and sold them to multiple banks, they could potentially be liable under civil rights laws. Not for banking violations, they were not banks, but for conspiracy to violate constitutional rights. It was a theory, untested, uncertain. But it was a thread Simone could pull without needing OCC authorization. A civil rights investigation was different from a banking examination. Different jurisdiction, different rules. She needed allies, people with the expertise and authority to pursue what she was uncovering. She thought about who she could trust, and made a decision that would change everything. March 18th, Atlanta. A coffee shop in Virginia Highland, far from any location associated with Meridian or the investigation. Simone sat at a corner table, watching the door. At 2:15 p.m., a woman entered, mid-40s, natural hair cut short, wearing the practical attire of someone who spent more time in courtrooms than offices. Denise Travers, civil rights attorney, 15 years with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. Reputation for taking cases others considered unwinnable, and somehow winning them anyway. They had crossed paths years ago at a conference on fair lending enforcement, had stayed in occasional contact. Enough for Simone to know that Travers was smart, careful, and committed to the kind of systemic change that went beyond individual cases. Travers spotted her, approached, sat down without ceremony. "You said it was important and confidential." "It is, both." Simone laid out what she had found: the coordination, the consulting firm, the evidence suggesting an industry-wide conspiracy to implement discriminatory policies under the guise of customer optimization. Travers listened without interruption, asked no questions until Simone finished. Then, "How did you obtain this evidence?" "Anonymous source, encrypted communications, chain of custody that would make any prosecutor nervous." "So you can't use it directly?" "Not in a regulatory action. But if someone were to file a civil lawsuit against the consulting firm, not the banks, discovery could potentially yield the same documents through legitimate legal process." Travers understood immediately. "You want me to file a case that gives you legal cover for evidence you already have. I want you to file a case that exposes a conspiracy affecting millions of people. The legal cover is incidental." "Is it?" Simone met her eyes. "I'm a federal employee operating at the edge of my authority. I need help from someone who can go where I can't." And if the case fails? If the evidence obtained through discovery doesn't match what your source provided? If the whole thing turns out to be disinformation? Then we've wasted time and resources pursuing a dead end. But if it's real, if there really is a coordinated effort to institutionalize discrimination across the banking industry, don't we have an obligation to pursue it? Travers was silent for a long moment, thinking through implications, weighing risks against potential rewards. The Legal Defense Fund doesn't take cases lightly. We have limited resources and unlimited demand. Every case we pursue means other cases we can't. I know. But if what you're describing is real, it would be the most significant fair lending case in a generation. The kind of case that changes law, not just outcomes. That's what I believe. Another pause. Travers pulled out a phone, typed something, read the response, typed again. I need to consult with my colleagues, review the materials you've described, do our own verification. Of course. If we decide to proceed, you understand that you'll be a witness. Your role in the investigation will become public. Your methods will be scrutinized. Everything you've done for the past year will be examined under a microscope. I understand. And if there are any irregularities, any ways in which you exceeded your authority or compromised evidence, it will come out. Could damage your career. Possibly end it. Simone thought about the 47 complaints. The 12 voices in the community center. Evelyn Marsh, 72 years old, asking if it was over. Some things matter more than careers. Travers studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. Send me what you have. Everything. I'll review it over the next 2 weeks and give you an answer. She stood, offered her hand. Thank you for bringing this to me. Whatever happens next, you've done the right thing. April. The waiting was hardest. Simone continued her regular duties at OCC, reviewed other cases, conducted other examinations, pretended that she was not sitting on evidence that could reshape the entire industry. The Meridian Consent Order implementation continued. The Federal Monitor filed quarterly reports showing satisfactory progress on required reforms. The class action lawsuit crawled through pretrial motions. The grand jury investigation into obstruction continued behind closed doors. Small movements. Incremental progress. The slow machinery of accountability grinding forward. But underneath it all, Simone felt the weight of what she knew, the scope of what remained hidden, the people still being discriminated against at banks across the country while the system that enabled it continued operating in the shadows. On April 22nd, Travers called. We're in. The Legal Defense Fund is filing suit against Whitfield Partners and 6 unnamed co-conspirators for conspiracy to violate civil rights under 42 U.S.C. Section 1985. We're naming 4 major banks as defendants in related claims. 4 banks, including Meridian. When? Tomorrow morning. Simultaneous filing in federal district court and press conference announcing the action. This is going to be big, Simone, very big. I'm ready. Are you? Because once this drops, your life changes. You become a public figure, a target. Everything you've done will be scrutinized. Are you sure you're prepared for that? Simone thought about her mother, the nurse who spent 40 years documenting suffering and fighting for patients who could not fight for themselves. The truth has weight. Eventually, it breaks through. I'm prepared. Then I'll see you at the press conference. 9 a.m., Russell Federal Building. Wear something camera ready. April 23rd, 9 a.m. The press conference was larger than Simone had expected. National media, cable news cameras, reporters from outlets she had only read, never imagined appearing in. Travers stood at the podium, flanked by other LDF attorneys. Behind them, a banner showing the organization's logo and the words Justice for All. Today, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund is filing the most significant fair lending lawsuit in 20 years. We are alleging that Whitfield Partners, a consulting firm, conspired with major financial institutions to develop and implement discriminatory policies affecting millions of American consumers. She described the allegations, the coordination, the consulting framework, the pattern of discrimination hidden behind corporate language and institutional complexity. This is not about bad apples. This is about a system designed to treat people differently based on their appearance, their neighborhood, their perceived economic status, characteristics that correlate strongly with race and ethnicity. This is redlining for the 21st century, implemented through algorithms and policies instead of literal red lines on maps. Questions erupted. Travers handled them with practiced ease. Yes, they had evidence. No, they could not share specifics before discovery. Yes, they expected the defendants to fight vigorously. Yes, this would take years to resolve. Then someone asked about the source of the investigation. Our information comes from multiple sources, including federal regulatory examinations, public records, and confidential whistleblowers. We are grateful to the individuals within these institutions who chose conscience over convenience and provided evidence of wrongdoing. Whistleblowers. Plural. Protecting Simone's identity while acknowledging that inside help had been crucial. After the press conference, Simone stood in the hallway, processing what had just happened. The secret she had carried for months was now public knowledge, or at least the existence of the conspiracy was public. Her specific role remained shielded for now. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Well played. But you've just made very powerful enemies. Watch your back. She deleted the message, but kept the warning in mind. May. The backlash began. Whitfield Partners denied all allegations, called the lawsuit baseless and politically motivated, hired a crisis communications firm that flooded media with counter-narratives about overzealous regulators and activist lawyers. The banks issued coordinated statements expressing confidence that they would be vindicated, pointed to their diversity initiatives and community investments as evidence that discrimination was impossible at institutions so committed to inclusion. Conservative media picked up the story as an example of liberal overreach, called it a shakedown, accused the Legal Defense Fund of trying to extort settlements from companies too afraid to fight. And quietly, professionally, the pressure began on Simone. An anonymous complaint filed with OCC's Internal Affairs, alleging that she had exceeded her examination authority and improperly shared confidential information with outside parties. A Freedom of Information Act request for all communications between her and any attorneys outside the agency. Inquiries from congressional staffers about her role in the investigation. Nothing openly threatening, just the application of institutional pressure designed to make her life difficult and discourage others from following her example. Deputy Director Vance called her in for a meeting. You understand the position this puts us in. I understand. The complaint alleges that you shared examination materials with external parties. If true, that's a serious violation. I shared evidence of potential criminal conspiracy with an organization equipped to investigate it. OCC doesn't have jurisdiction over consulting firms. I found the appropriate authority and referred the matter. That's one interpretation. It's the accurate interpretation. Vance sighed. I believe you, but belief isn't enough. There will be an investigation. You'll be interviewed, your communications reviewed, your actions scrutinized. I expected that. And if the investigation finds violations, even technical ones, there will be consequences, possibly termination. I know. Vance studied her for a long moment. Why? You had a successful career. The Meridian case was a win. You could have stopped there. Because Meridian was one branch of one bank. The problem is the whole tree. If I had the ability to expose it and chose not to, I would be complicit in every future harm the system causes. Some would say you've already done enough, that pursuing the larger conspiracy is someone else's job. Some would say a lot of things. I have to be able to look at myself in the mirror. Vance nodded slowly. For what it's worth, I think you did the right thing, but I may not be able to protect you. I'm not asking you to. The summer was brutal. Internal investigation, document review, interrogation by agency lawyers who treated her like a suspect rather than a colleague. Meanwhile, the civil lawsuit progressed. Discovery requests flew back and forth. Whitfield and the banks fought every document demand, every deposition notice, every attempt to uncover what they had hidden. But the lawsuit had accomplished something crucial. It had put the conspiracy on the public record. Now everyone knew, or at least suspected, that what happened at Meridian was not isolated. That discrimination was designed, not accidental. That the system was rotten at levels most people never saw. That knowledge changed things. Other whistleblowers came forward, former Whitfield employees, bank staff who had implemented the protocols and felt guilty about it, executives who had attended the coordination meetings and kept quiet for years. Each new source provided additional evidence, additional verification, additional proof that what the anonymous emailer had described was real. By August, the Legal Defense Fund had enough documentation to survive the inevitable motion to dismiss. The case would proceed to full discovery, to depositions, to the kind of invasive examination that institutions feared most. And on August 15th, something unexpected happened. Nolan Carver, the former Meridian VP who had been demoted but not fired, contacted Travers directly, said he wanted to cooperate, said he had information about the coordination that he had not shared with regulators because he feared retaliation. Carver knew who SV was. September, a conference room in the Legal Defense Fund's Atlanta office. Simone sat beside Travers, across the table from Nolan Carver and his attorney. Recording devices active. Court reporter present. Everything documented. Mr. Carver, you've indicated that you have information about the coordination of discriminatory policies across multiple financial institutions. Please describe what you know. Carver looked older than Simone remembered. Thinner. The confidence she had seen at the resolution meeting was gone, replaced by something that looked like exhaustion. I attended 3 meetings of what they called the Strategic Vision Council. Industry executives, consultants, a few academics who provided intellectual cover. The purpose was to align approaches to what they called customer portfolio optimization. When did these meetings occur? 2019, 2020, and 2021. I stopped attending after that. Told Webb I was uncomfortable with the direction. What direction? The explicit goal was to reduce services to customers deemed low value. The criteria they used, appearance, neighborhood, transaction patterns, everyone in the room knew what that meant. But no one said it directly. It was all euphemisms, all optimization and efficiency and resource allocation. Who led these meetings? Carver hesitated, glanced at his attorney, received a small nod. The chair was different each year, rotating leadership to prevent any single person from becoming too visible. But there was one person who was always present, who set the agenda, who everyone deferred to. Who was that? Her name is Sandra Villanueva. She's the founder and CEO of Whitfield Partners. SV Sandra Villanueva. Not just a consultant selling frameworks, the architect of the entire system. Can you describe her role in the meetings? She presented the data, showed how the protocols were working at different institutions, made recommendations for refinements, answered questions about implementation. She was the expert everyone relied on. Did she know that the protocols would result in discrimination? Carver was silent for a moment. She knew exactly what she was building. There were discussions about legal exposure, about how to document policies in ways that would survive regulatory scrutiny, about maintaining plausible deniability at every level. Those were her exact words. Plausible deniability. Why are you telling us this now? You could have shared this information during the OCC investigation. Another hesitation, longer this time. Because I was afraid. These people have resources, connections, ways of making problems disappear. I saw what happened to Webb, thrown under the bus the moment he became a liability. I didn't want that to be me. What changed? I watched the press conference, heard the allegations laid out publicly, realized that the secret was already out, and staying silent was just protecting people who would never protect me. He looked directly at Simone for the first time. "And I saw you, at the resolution meeting, at the hearing. You never backed down, never compromised. I kept thinking about that, wondering what it would feel like to be on the right side instead of always calculating which side was safest." Simone held his gaze. "Mr. Carver, you participated in this system for years. You implemented policies that hurt thousands of people. A lot of those people will never get justice, no matter what happens in this lawsuit." "I know." "Does that bother you?" "Every day. But I can't change what I did. I can only change what I do now." The deposition continued for 6 hours. Carver provided names, dates, documents, described meetings, conversations, decisions, connected dots that the investigation had been trying to connect for months. When it was over, Travers walked Simone to her car. "That changes everything. We have a direct witness to the coordination, someone who attended the meetings, who can identify the participants, who can testify about the explicit intent. Is it enough? It's a foundation. We still need documentary evidence that corroborates his account, still need to survive the inevitable attacks on his credibility. But yes, it's enough to push forward. What happens to him? Depends on whether he tells the truth under oath. If his testimony holds up, he becomes a cooperating witness. If it falls apart, he becomes another defendant." He seemed genuine. Maybe. Or maybe he's cutting a deal to save himself and will say whatever he thinks we want to hear. People are complicated, Simone. Especially people who've spent years doing things they knew were wrong. October. 1 year since Simone had walked into Meridian National Bank wearing worn shoes and carrying a canvas bag. The anniversary passed without ceremony. She was too busy to notice. The lawsuit was consuming everything: her time, her energy, her identity. The OCC internal investigation had concluded with a finding of insufficient evidence of policy violations. Not vindication exactly, but not termination either. Simone kept her job, her clearance, her position. The price was an informal understanding that she would step back from active involvement in the civil case, leaving the public work to Travers and the Legal Defense Fund. She accepted the bargain, did her official duties, kept her head down, but at night, in her apartment, she followed every development, read every filing, prepared testimony she hoped she would eventually be allowed to give. Sandra Villanueva had been deposed in September, had invoked Fifth Amendment protections against self-incrimination on dozens of questions, had provided carefully crafted non-answers on the rest, but the documents were emerging, through discovery, through subpoenas, through additional whistleblowers emboldened by Carver's example, emails, meeting minutes, presentation decks, training materials, all of it showing exactly what the anonymous source had described: a coordinated, deliberate effort to develop and implement discriminatory policies across the banking industry. And all of it pointing back to Whitfield Partners, to Sandra Villanueva, to the woman who had built a business on teaching banks how to discriminate without getting caught. The next update will reveal what happens when institutions finally face consequences, and what it costs the people who made accountability possible. December. 15 months after the investigation began, settlement negotiations had been ongoing for weeks. The banks, facing mounting evidence and public pressure, were looking for exits. Whitfield Partners, facing potential criminal referral, was desperate for resolution. The Legal Defense Fund was willing to negotiate, but not for money alone. Systemic reform, Travers explained at a strategy meeting. We want policy changes that affect the entire industry, not just the defendants. Mandatory fair lending audits, disclosure requirements for customer service metrics by demographic group, independent oversight of consulting relationships. Will they agree to that? Some of it. Probably not all. But we're not just trying to win this case, we're trying to change the rules. The negotiations culminated in a proposed consent decree, different from the regulatory consent order, but similar in structure. The defendants would pay substantial penalties, would implement specific reforms, would submit to monitoring, and Sandra Villanueva would be barred from the consulting industry for life. It was not criminal prosecution. She would not go to prison for what she had built, but she would lose her business, her reputation, her ability to continue profiting from discrimination. Some justice. Not all, but some. The decree was announced in January, 2 years after Simone had first received the assignment to investigate Meridian National Bank. Total penalties exceeded $50 million. Required reforms would affect dozens of institutions. A new industry oversight body would be created, with authority to audit consulting relationships and flag potentially discriminatory frameworks before implementation. Travers held a press conference, thanked the whistleblowers, thanked the community members who had shared their stories, thanked everyone who had contributed to a victory that had taken years and might take years more to fully implement. She did not name Simone, but she looked at the camera and said, "This case began because one person refused to accept that discrimination was just how things were. One person who looked at a system designed to be invisible and decided to make it visible. That's how change happens, one person at a time, one refusal at a time, one act of courage at a time." Epilogue. March. Simone stood in Oakland Cemetery, near the bell tower where she had received the flash drive 2 years earlier. The graves stretched around her, silent witnesses to all the stories that had ended here, all the lives that had been lived, with their triumphs and failures and compromises. She thought about Evelyn Marsh, who had received a settlement check and used part of it to establish a scholarship for black students pursuing careers in financial regulation. She thought about the 12 community members who had stood together and refused to be silenced. She thought about Nolan Carver, whose testimony had helped bring down the system he had served, and who now worked as a compliance consultant, helping banks identify and eliminate discriminatory practices. Penance, perhaps, or opportunism, or something in between. She thought about Harrison Webb, who had pleaded guilty to obstruction charges and received probation, no prison time, but a felony record that followed him everywhere. She thought about Sandra Villanueva, barred from consulting, reportedly writing a book that would tell her side of the story. And she thought about the anonymous source, who had never been identified, never revealed themselves, never received credit for the evidence that had made everything possible. "More when it is safe," the source had written. But no more had come. Just silence, stretching from the last message to now. Maybe the source had been discovered. Maybe they had decided that enough had been done. Maybe they were waiting for the next crisis, the next investigation, the next person willing to receive what they had to offer. Simone would probably never know. Her phone buzzed. Text from Darnell Yates. New assignment. Different bank. Different city. Similar patterns. "You interested?" She looked at the text, looked at the graves, looked at the city spread out beyond the cemetery walls, full of institutions and systems and people who built them and people who fought them. The consent decree was signed. The reforms were beginning. The immediate crisis was resolved. But the system was still there. Modified, monitored, constrained, but still there. Still capable of finding new ways to discriminate. Still designed by people who believed that some customers were worth more than others. The fight was not over, would never be over. Not really. But that was okay. That was the nature of the work. Not a single battle, but a continuous effort. Not victory, but vigilance. She typed her reply to Yates. "Send me the file." Then she walked out of the cemetery, into the March sunlight, toward whatever came next. 2 weeks later. Simone's apartment. Evening. She was reviewing the new case file when her laptop pinged with an encrypted message. Different sender than before. Different routing. Ms. Adair. You did well with Meridian and Whitfield, but there's more. Always more. The coordination you uncovered was one layer. There are others. Deeper. More powerful. Not just banks. Not just consulting firms. When you're ready to see how deep this goes, let me know. A friend. She stared at the message, felt the familiar weight of knowledge she had not asked for, responsibility she had not sought. The truth had weight. Her mother had said that, but she had not said how much weight one person could carry. Simone closed the laptop, walked to the window, looked out at the Atlanta skyline, at all the buildings full of all the people making all the decisions that shaped other people's lives. Somewhere out there, the friend waited, with more secrets, more evidence, more layers of a system that seemed to have no bottom. She could ignore the message, focus on the new assignment, stay within the boundaries of her authority and her sanity. Or she could reply, open another door, step into another maze that might take years to navigate and might not have an exit. The choice was hers. It always had been. She returned to the laptop, read the message again, then typed 2 words, "I'm ready," and hit send. The cursor blinked. No response came that night, but Simone knew it would come. Eventually, it always did, because the system was vast, and the people willing to fight it were few, and those few always found each other, in anonymous messages, in encrypted files, in cemetery meetings and courthouse hallways, and all the spaces where truth gathered before it broke through. The Meridian case was closed. The Whitfield case was settled. The consent decrees were signed. But the work continued, would always continue. One person at a time, one refusal at a time, one act of courage at a time, until the system that was designed to be invisible could no longer hide, until the truth was undeniable, until justice, partial and imperfect and hard-won, finally arrived. Simone turned off the laptop, went to bed. Tomorrow there would be more documents to review, more patterns to identify, more evidence to gather. Tomorrow the work would continue. But tonight, for a few hours, she would rest. She had earned that much.
Thank you for taking the time to watch this video today. If you found the content helpful, please remember to like and subscribe so you won't miss our upcoming episodes. If you have any questions or suggestions, feel free to leave a comment below. We are always here to listen.